Bob, I really appreciate you first off making the drive out here. It's a good run from the other side of Fort Worth, the north side of Fort Worth, to the south side of Dallas.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a while, so
A couple of years now. Actually.
Yeah. So I finally had a little bit of time, so I thought it'd be good to take care of it, and I got some great things to talk about too. So.
Yeah, and I'm excited to hear all about that, and I have a handful of questions on those topics. But at the same time, like your just career or your whole like existence within motorcycling and the aftermarket and custom motorcycling, I mean, it goes back so far. I'd like to give people some of that kind of, history to kind of set up for what's going on now and what you got your hands in now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. In fact, I thought you'd want to go over a little bit of that. And I found this picture just before I was leaving. So my first year in the shop was 1971. So I was working over 50 years in this business. That's all I've ever done. But the first year, I lived in a converted Dodge kind of milk truck out behind the shop.
Yeah.
And this is up north in the Boston area. So right through the winter.
Damn.
You
lived in it?
Lived in it.
Nice.
Out behind the shop. Here's a picture of it because I thought you'd really appreciate that. That's my wife before we got married.
Oh, hell yeah.
And down on Cape Cod, they used to take those things, and it had like a house refrigerator in it and a gas stove and bunk bed and stuff inside the deal. And they used to put airplane tires on it and run them down on the beach. So I got it, and I put some other tires on it so I can ride it on the road. But I used to have an electric blanket because the heater didn't work in it, and they'd wake me up in the morning by unplugging the thing.
That'd be crazy, just up in Boston with that cold air, just being in a van all winter. Man, that's hardcore.
Well, but I was so I'm a third generation Harley rider.
Yeah.
My grandfather, when I grew up, the Holy Grail was this 29 JDH that he ordered from the factory. White with gold stripes and everything. And in fact, I didn't even see a picture of the thing until a few years ago when my father passed away. We found an old album.
Damn.
But we heard stories about that all the time,
Damn.
And then my father rode, of course. He rode. And when I was living at home, they didn't want me to have a motorcycle. They wanted me to have the better life. My mother was a college grad. My father wasn't. They wanted us to go off to college and all that kind of stuff. I had plenty. I had a first car when I was 12 years old. I had go-karts and three-point hydroplanes. So they didn't care about that. And I was tearing that stuff apart all the time. So I kept plenty busy. But
once you get sucked into the lifestyle of motorcycles.
Yeah. So what happens? I went to Woodstock.
Yeah.
And met this buddy of mine when we went to college. A few weeks after that, we had our first year in college, University of Bridgeport, and we kind of looked at each other and said, "Hey, man, he's a cool guy." So we threw my roommate out and moved him. Didn't ask anybody.
Yeah.
We just did it. We became best friends. Well, it turned out he was already a national motocross star. His father had a couple shops. It was John Bentoncourt. And that was it. It started then, Less than a year later, I bought my first motorcycle. And that's when I started working in the shop and living in the back of that deal. So the first year in the shop, being the new guy, I knew I was going to get laid off. Up north especially, the things slow down quite a bit in the winter. So, but I never stopped working. I still showed up every day. I was living at the shop. I still did my job. I'd go collect, some money on unemployment for a couple months till they could hire me back again. But that was it. I never stopped. The motorcycle thing just was in my soul.
Yeah.
It grabbed me. The first time when I was about 10 years old, a couple guys on panheads rolled into our driveway. And, they had the jeans with the cuffs and the white shirts with the Lucky Strikes rolled up and the whole deal. And they came to see my father for some guns or something. I don't know what the deal was. I don't remember. But I was in awe.
Yeah.
And ever since then, I was into cars and stuff like that. And then when I had the chance to get into motorcycles,
So what was that?
No question.
You were 12. So what was that, like early 60s?
Yeah.
Or late. Okay.
Yeah. So I born in 51. So early 60s. Yep. Yeah, like that. So, so I didn't have my first motorcycle till I was 19. But that was it. And I still have that bike. In fact, I used to road race that bike. It was my street bike. You know,
What was it?
It was a Honda 450, 68 Honda 450. I bought off the Cape for $300.
Damn.
First thing I did was put some ape hangers on it and put some flames on the tank and stuff, you know, rode around like that. But then the shop that I worked in was actually a race shop. The guys, they road race, they did dirt racing, you know, motocross, enduro, all that stuff. And so I got the racing bug. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I just redid it, cleaned it up a little bit. Not so it's really running yet.
Yeah.
But I painted the frame again and the bike and stuff. We got a little museum going up in Arkansas, so I'm going to put it up there. But we splayed the heads. We bored it out to 500cc, triangulated the frame, modified some CB77 rear sets for the deal. Nice. So, you know, I loved it. I was not a good racer, but I loved racing.
Yeah, that was I was going to ask you, like, you know, getting into the motorcycle thing, I could see that you probably would have went that way with the, you know, the Japanese bikes or the racing, more racer bikes, right? I don't know what the right term is for it, because your buddy that you became close friends with was probably going to push you in that direction, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I did a little bit of motocross racing, a little bit of short track racing. I had an XL 350 punched out again with a champion frame and did a little bit of that.
Was that kind of the time frame when the Japanese motorcycles were starting to kind of push into the American market?
Yeah, absolutely. The bike I had, a lot of the components I got that made it for racing, because up till 1970, 500cc was the open class. When they came out with the Honda 750 in 1971, they upped the class. So I was a little underpowered. On the tight tracks, I could do pretty good, but, you know, I couldn't keep up with a 750 on the long straightaways. But, yeah, that was about the time. Up until then, it was XLCH, Triumph Bonnevilles. You know, when I was in high school, that's what everybody had pretty much.
Yeah, oh, so the British and the Italian bikes were pretty prevalent here before the Japanese market moved in?
Yeah. That was, I mean, really Triumph and Harley, you know. I mean, really that was, well, when I went to high school, that was the deal, you know.
Yeah, well, like Triumph choppers were always, like, I've seen a bunch of cool ones in just my years of being in motorcycles. I don't know much about Triumphs, but I could see that if you had a connection in family or something that, you know, something might draw you to that type of bike. I always think it's like an MG. Remember those cars, the midgets?
Yes, absolutely.
Not a lot of people grew up saying, I want to build a midget. But if there happens to be one in the family, it kind of becomes like a inherited project or something like that, you know?
Well, and part of that was the money, too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the Triumph or the MG was a lot cheaper.
Yes, it was.
Than going out and buying a Corvette or you know, a Harley at the time. So a lot of guys got into that. And it was, you know, there was parts, there was hardtail sections and hardtail frames for Hondas and Triumphs. I mean, the Honda 754, there was a lot of choppers built with those things, especially with the Amen frames and stuff like that. So, yeah, back in the early 70s, it was a pretty cool time for custom bikes.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, you were talking about the guys rolling up on panheads in essentially 63. I mean, that's kind of like, you know, not the birth, but like the culture of like the club world was really already around heavy at that time, but it started to become way more mainstream for what I've read and watched.
Absolutely.
You know?
So when you think like S&S really began around 1958, when George was making parts for drag racing and stuff like that, George Sr. And then some other guys came in, and Truett and Osborne, you know, they were doing, it started out with performance stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, and obviously just history-wise, I wasn't around, but when the guys came back out of World War II, they didn't want to ride their father's bikes. They want to ride big baggers and stuff. So it all started by stripping bikes down. I mean, they made handlebars out of the legs of tables and stuff, you know. You'd extend the springers using the old A-arms off of Fords and stuff like that. They did that. When we were in NEMPCO, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But we used to sell these things called slugs.
Yeah.
And we had this steel cart that was probably about 3 feet high and about 2 feet square. and we had all different lengths of slugs from 2 to 6 inches, and you would just screw them into the top of your fork tubes, and that's how you got extended fork tubes until they started making them.
I mean, that's pretty much what they do now on a lot of
Well,
these bikes too,
you know, it's really funny because I used to do these seminars kind of or presentations on the history with choppers and stuff like that. I used to talk about extending the springers and using those studs, you know, the like the slugs. And then I see the guys with the baggers coming out with doing that again to compensate for the extra rake. So I thought that was pretty funny, you know.
Yeah, it's. I mean, hey, it's an old method that's tried and true. You know what I mean?
What goes around comes around. There's not a whole lot of things that are really brand new these days, you know.
Yeah, that's Yeah, I find that that time frame fascinating. That's kind of when, magazines started to become produced in the late 60s. I think there was stuff around, but it's real hard to find motorcycle magazines from the early 60s if there was. I've been looking. I don't know, because like Easy Rider Street Chopper was out, wasn't it?
Well, Easy Rider was out before. Mel and Joe Teresi.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the guys that started Easy Riders. And they Jammer, they had Jammer and stuff like that, and they came out. Originally, it was like Jammer was almost like a parts type of magazine type of thing, and then the Easy Riders came out with more of the lifestyle stuff. And there was a couple other magazines, but
what time frame was that though?
That's probably mid '60s.
Oh, okay.
That probably mid '60s, and then when of course the Easy Rider movie came out, that's when choppers really started to grow.
Could you? Even though I know that like testing the waters, seeing what the vibe is probably easier now because of social media. But when that movie came out, could you feel a difference or like a real push towards that motorcycles and chopper culture? Did it take a while to?
I certainly did. Yeah. Like I said, because that's when I bought the first bike. So the first thing I did was put ape hangers and flames on. It wasn't. Yeah. That was the deal. But everybody talked about it. You got to remember. Like late '60s, there was also a social kind of culture change going on.
Okay.
With the Woodstock, I mean that was part of the deal. The hippies and the drugs and the motorcycles and that whole deal that you kind of saw in that movie. So there was a whole lot of things going on like that, and that Easy Rider movie just put that whole thing together. And what a freedom of expression was when, two guys riding choppers, going anywhere they wanted to go.
It probably makes sense because, in my opinion, or just kind of like, connecting dots, maybe that movie, among a few other ones that are iconic for that time frame, showed people in more rural parts of the country, like these alternative ways of living or seeing or going about their life. The same way, like, I feel like social media did, like Instagram did for me whenever it first came out. It kind of exposed like different ways people were living their life, traveling on choppers and backpacking parts of the world. Like that shit wasn't in my TV shows and stuff I watched growing up. You know what I mean? I just wasn't connected to those ideas at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise, until I saw that movie. I mean, I remember up north, like you said, the clubs are around, really started to get bigger around the late 50s and stuff like that. And they started to form, probably early 50s even, some of the clubs. But I remember being in these little towns up north in New Hampshire, and 200 HA guys would come riding through town, and just it was a whole different thing, and you knew that was out there. You started to become more aware of it, and that movie just brought that whole subculture thing together. And it was, if you had long hair and stuff, I mean, it was an issue. People didn't want to talk to you. They looked down at you. You were more susceptible to getting busted for whatever, I mean, it was pretty crazy time.
A lot of stereotyping going on. A
lot of stereotyping.
Profiling. Everybody's
profile. Yeah. You talk about, with the MRF and IMA, we fought a lot of that profiling stuff, but that's when it all started. It was real. I mean, you really all that stuff you saw and the way that movie ended, that was not shit. That was real stuff going on.
Yeah, it's wild. Well, so what was, so you're doing this stuff, living in the back of this shop in this van, how do you progress into these different roles in the motorcycle industry the way you did? Like,
so I started out. My first job there was putting together bikes out of the crates.
Yeah. Get them make readies kind of thing.
Getting them ready, take them out of the crate, put them together, tune them up, and get them ready for sale. Mm-hmm. They needed some help in the parts, and I was pretty sharp. I had a pretty good mind, pretty good memory, and stuff like that. So I kind of started working behind the parts counter, and I learned the system, the Honda system, not much really different than the Harley parts number system. If you know how they go together and what all the different codes and groupings meant. Yeah. So a lot of times, I could take care of people without even going to the parts book. Yeah. Or if we didn't have something, I could find something to make it work. The big deal back then was there wasn't accessories available for everything. And the accessories that were available didn't always fit. Yeah. And, you didn't have the part supplies, and you certainly didn't have the sources that you have right now. Mm-hmm. So being able to make do and adjust and keep the customer happy was really the trick. Yeah. And I had a knack for doing that. So so that's right. I got into the parts counter. I became the parts manager. I think in 3 years I became the parts manager. And then in 1974, who was my wife then, we had gotten married, and me and a friend and his girlfriend headed off for Mexico in a short wheelbase Dodge van with an XL 250 on the back and a big plywood wooden box on top with all our stuff in it. Yeah. And we went traveling for about 40 days. We went traveling all through Mexico, and we had a great time. There's lots of stories that go with that. And we came back and didn't have any money as we got back to the border. My father wired us down some money, and then we went to the Mardi Gras. And we got back, and he had worked with me at the shop too, and we decided we were going to open our own shop. Okay, yeah. So we opened up Motorcycle Madness. And what we were doing was building Jap choppers. Okay. Because the Harley guys didn't want anything to do with Jap.
Well, mid '70s, it seems like that's digger style and those long, Yeah. That was coming in heavy.
That was like, Imperowitz was just down the street from us then.
Okay, yeah.
And I didn't really know Dave that well then. We were physically we weren't that far from each other and stuff. But yeah, the diggers. And what it was like, it came from drag racing. Yeah, yeah. The style using Sportster front end, stripping down the big bikes and stuff, where Willie G eventually got his design ideas for that 71 Super Glide. Mm-hmm. It was just what all the aftermarket guys had been doing, and then they developed into that digger style as they refined it. Yeah. But so we nobody would do it. The Honda guys, they wouldn't do anything that wasn't stock. The Harley guys didn't want to let any of the Honda guys around, there was really a separation there. So we found this little niche, and we were doing okay. We weren't getting rich or anything, but we were having a good time, and we had our own shop. We were kids. We were like, 20-something years old and stuff. We had the shop going on. And the end of the first season, we lost the shop. The guy wanted to do something else with the business, and we didn't really have enough money to float the whole deal like that. So I drove a truck. But the only time in the 50 years I wasn't into motorcycles, I drove a truck for about 2 months. Damn. Just to keep things going. Yeah. And then that spring, I went into Boston, and there was a shop, Honda Boston. I went in there, and I said, I want a job. And they go, well, you're too qualified. I go, what do you mean I'm too qualified? I said, give me the shittiest jobs you got. I'll fill the batteries. I'll clean the toilets. I'll mop the floors, whatever it is. I don't care what you want to pay me. I got to work back in the motorcycle business. Yeah, yeah. So they took a chance, and I did well there because of that skill set of making things do. Yeah. And a couple years later, I became the manager of the store. Mm. And I had been short track racing at that time. I went from road racing to short track racing. And I wasn't a very good racer. I had a good whole shop, but I just couldn't hang in there, like that. And I realized at that point I had gone up into management. I wasn't going to do anything other than motorcycles, so it probably was a good idea to go back to school. Mm. So I went back to school for business, They actually paid for my schooling, so I'd work about 60, 70 hours a week running the shop in Boston, go to school, take 2 or 3 credits a week, semester, and then race on the weekend. So I literally had maybe an hour or two of spare time if I had any during that time. So that's how that whole progressed into that management thing. And this group I went to work for was actually it was a tough time for motorcycles. I mean, it's always been a tough time for motorcycles.
Was this mid-'70s?
Yeah, this was so this was 74, 75.
Okay.
The spring of 75 when I went to work in Boston.
Yeah, wasn't there? I mean, I read something about it because you're coming up to when Harley even had to sell the AMF essentially. Like you're getting on the beginning of that whole thing. So the economy just must have been just really shit in that later part of the 70s.
Oh, it was
the
so
gas crisis and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Jimmy Carter ruined that.
It was so competitive. It was crazy too. And my deal was as I got into being general manager, I ended up covering sales a lot of the time. And we had another Honda shop, probably a mile and a half away.
Damn.
So it was very, very competitive. Plus, and they were, like always, the OEMs are throwing you. You got to buy more inventory. You got to do this. You had more than you need. So my deal was I'd find out what the best price was that they had. Mm-hmm. They'd tell me, and then I'd add $200 onto it. And they go, "What do you mean you're adding money? Don't you want to beat the price?" I said, "The problem is, if you go buy that bike at the other place, you're not buying it from me, and nobody's going to take care of you like I am."
Yeah.
So that kind of philosophy really worked because this guys, they ended up buying shops. We ended up owning 7 shops in the Boston area. That was everything but Harley. Mm-hmm. And by 1976, 77, I was running all the shops.
Damn.
And then in 79, I started my first distributorship working with them. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty interesting because we were, all the competitors knew that we had all these shops. And all I wanted to do was buy the stuff cheaper. It wasn't like the distributorship was our only business. So I'd go around selling myself. I'd do the ordering. I'd had an assistant, and she would sit across from me on the desk. And when I was busy doing the ordering stuff, she would answer the phone. She'd have a question. I'd give her the answer. And it was pretty interesting. But I gave the other shops good deals, too.
Yeah.
I said, "Hey, I'm going to give you a better deal than you're going to get anywhere else."
Yeah.
So... Well, if you don't want to buy it, that's fine. I understand, So we did well. But, what was really cool back then was there was a independent shop just down the street from us. And wicked competitive, like I said. They just did accessories and stuff. They didn't do bikes, and they sold stuff for everything. But if they ran out of something, they ran out of a case of plugs, I'd lend them a case of plugs. And when they got them in, they'd do. And we did that was the whole beauty of the industry back then. Everybody had each other's back, and you were competitors, and you rode a Jap bike, you rode a Harley, but there was this understanding you were on 2 wheels, and we've kind of lost that.
Well, because it was you versus the rest of society more.
Right. You know what? I never thought about that, but you're probably right. You're probably absolutely right.
And of course, this is just the perception looking back at what's available to learn from. But I mean, going back to, the Easy Rider, the long hair, the bike, like you were not really a part of society. You were an outcast of it so much that you banded together until it became part of, I don't know, it seems like it became accepted by the mainstream, world, I guess you'd say. And now there's nobody to hate you, so you got to hate each other, I guess. You know what I mean?
I guess. I don't know.
You always need an enemy. I mean, you don't need one, but you need opposition sometimes.
It seems to be that way. We've certainly seen that with the last 4 years and the politics going on, without a doubt. So, so that was kind of, I ended up getting my degree in business administration, and I was preparing my resume. And a buddy of mine that was in the business that I had known, there was a company, Beck Arnley, that used to be out of Boston. I don't know if you ever heard of them. They were an aftermarket company at the time. Yeah. And he had worked from them, and then he went over to NEMPCO, which another friend of mine. So I had known NEMPCO. I'd been a customer of theirs. Yeah. Even though they were mostly Harley stuff, there was some things that I bought from them. And so he said, "Hey, you ought to come up by and talk to Larry." Larry was the guy that owned the place and started it. I said, "Yeah, okay." And that was it. He said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "What do you need?"
Yeah.
I said, "Whatever you need, man. I'll do it." It was the chance for me to get in the Harley business, and that
you seemed
was
like you had a problem-solving mentality or just attribute to yourself to where whatever role you got put in, you figured it out. Like you can solve, like whatever issues came to your way, you can source the solutions for things, and that's kind of like when I meet people like that, I have some of that quality. That's why I recognize it in people. You see that those kind of like mentalities progress further in things because they're, there's nothing they can't handle. You know what I mean? And so it's always a challenge and a push to get through things. You know what I mean?
It's funny that you say that because the first day I show up, I was so proud to be working in the Harley business. I mean, I love my whole time and everything I did in the Japanese end of things and stuff like that. But this was it, man. I was big time. So I show up to work the first day, got my briefcase and stuff. I go, "So what do you want me to do?" He goes, "There's a desk in the hallway, man. You figure it out." So I went everybody for some reason seems to hate to process returns in the distribution business.
Yeah.
So I went back, and a week later, I had gotten them another $60,000 by just processing the returns, and then moved on to the next thing. And
it
wasn't a year later. So what Deb and I used to do is we would flip some houses to make extra. We weren't making a whole lot of money in the motorcycle business then. So, and she was volunteering as a teacher at the time. So we had just flipped a house. And I talked to Larry and Mike. I said, "What do you guys think, man? I got this money. I'm not quite sure what's going on with the housing market." And they go, "Well, would you be interested in buying into the company?"
Yeah.
I said, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
So I bought into 5% of the company. 10 years later, I owned a third of the company. And that's when we sold to Takaraki at that point,
So what was the aftermarket parts like? Because that's mainly what this was, right? What was that process like? I mean, are these things that they're finding in the back of an Easy Rider magazine, like a mail order kind of thing? Or how did people order parts back in that time?
Well, initially it was from the Easy Rider magazine, like Jammer and SMI and AE and some of the other guys like that.
Oh, wait. So kind of like how like Jegs would have the magazine with all the products in it.
Yeah.
And you just kind of, order a catalog and then flip through it.
You get a catalog or find out from somebody, like that, or you're doing this, and it was, your buddy would tell you something, and then you'd find something else out. You didn't have the internet to go to.
Yeah.
And it started out like that. And then one of the first guys that really started to go big was Gary Bang at the time. And Gary had a shop, and he opened Gary Bang, and he ran a good business, good distribution business. And then in the early 70s, Custom Chrome started, but they came out of retail. NEMPCO started, and Drag Specialties started, and that's when they started to put together these catalogs. Like our first catalog, I think was like 30 pages.
Yeah.
Mimeographed. It was stapled together with a yellow cover with a printing on it and stuff like that. And you would just go out to dealers.
Yeah.
Our first guy, Charlie Hedaya, was Charlie Hedaya Sr. Charlie Hedaya Jr. is over at S&S right now. But Charlie Hedaya, who had been a friend of mine and had sold me stuff out of NEMPCO before, but he'd go around, he'd open up shops, and he'd just find the shops and go through the phone book. I mean, real hustle, just day-to-day hustle, doing that and building a customer base.
Knocking on doors, cold calling, basically.
Yep.
I mean, it's now that you say that, I'm just thinking about like in the 90s, like there almost everything was that way. You remember East Bay magazine with the shoes?
Yep.
And it would suck because like you'd be at a friend's house and you get one, and you're like, hell yeah, and then it'd be 4 months old or because they only did them every couple of months or like maybe twice a year or 4 times a year.
East Bay Trans World magazine, and then like J.C. Whitney, same thing. It's all the same stuff. You'd have the catalog just plethora.
Oh yeah, J.C. Whitney was a big one, but that was like all the Taiwan junk and everything. That was at the time. That's what everything came out of there. That's kind of, but so that was like through the 80s is that those things really started to grow.
Yeah.
Custom chrome really took off big. There's basically, when you're a distribution company, there's kind of three styles you can consider. You can be either product focused, service focused, or process focused. So custom chrome was product focused.
Yeah.
If they hit 10% of their new products, they were happy, with a success. Well, they
had their own products, though, right?
They would get them produced mostly over in Taiwan.
Yeah.
They would do that, especially in the beginning. But what really set them off was when they came out with the repop of the Fat Bob tanks.
Yeah. Okay, I remember that.
That just.
I don't remember that specifically, but I remember it being those tanks.
We were about the same size, at the time, and then they came out with that, and then bam, they went off, like crazy. Mm-hmm. So they were constantly pushing new products. Nace and Ty, those were the guys that started it, and Ty was very, very open-minded to the product. Nace would kind of go around to all the different places and look at stuff and come back with ideas. And they'd find somebody to produce the stuff, and that really pushed them way ahead, because up until that point, we were all about the same size. Mm-hmm. Then there was drag special, so they were focused on product. Drag Specialties initially was kind of product oriented. When what was his name? Tom, and in fact Tom Motzko, that's still in there, and the guy that started it. They were kind of focused on product, but they did a lot of things service oriented. They had this thing at one point. A friend of mine did, John Wyckoff, that was one of my mentors, called the Dragon Wagon. And he went around, it was like a motorhome, one of them GMC motorhomes, and he went around the country opening up shops. So they were real aggressive in that. When they became part of Parts Unlimited, their focus was process. And boy, that has served them well.
So what is the definition of process?
Being efficient, getting your parts in, turning it over. You don't want parts sitting on the shelf very long.
Yeah.
You want to turn them, And so they were able to, with their systems, they were able to develop systems. Fred was just incredible with that. He hired engineers just to develop how to process stuff. And so they had the parts all the time.
Yeah.
And they had some of the new product stuff, but really that process of having the parts.
Well, does like being a part of the service side of things, like, you say you're a Harley guy and you're taking care of head gaskets and oil changes and all that. Was there always an aftermarket to go to for those kind of serviceable things, or those consumables, if you will? From
about maybe late 70s.
Okay.
Really, James Gaskets.
Yeah.
They were doing the gasket stuff. So NEMPCO, we had our focus was customer service.
Yeah.
I mean, all my salespeople were guys that could pull an engine apart, so they knew the deal. And we weren't the biggest. If we didn't have it, we would tell people where they could get it.
Yeah.
And we came up with things like, we got pistons out of Taiwan, but we got the best pistons, and then we mated them to Hastings rings, and we had these sets.
Okay.
That were as good or better than Harley Davidson, actually. So it was new. And there wasn't the internet back then. What we had was this thing called the Thomas's Registry, and it was like an encyclopedia of manufacturers.
Okay.
So you would go through that encyclopedia. I mean, I'm telling you, I had bookshelves lined with these things, and you would get a part from Harley Davidson, and you would search for some kind of marking on it, and then you would go look at the Thomas's Registry, and again, back like doing business and sharing. So NEMPCO, we had the pistons and rings that we sold to everybody. All the brake hoses and stuff. We sold brake hoses to Drag and to Custom Chrome. We bought stuff from them that they had sourced out and they had the deal on. And it was still everybody kind of working together. So again, you were competitive, But there was just this thing about
Yeah.
working together because, I think your point was really valid, is that we weren't accepted by society, so we had to stick together.
Yeah. Well, just kind of like roughly piecing it together in my head, like just knowing kind of the model of what drag was 20 years ago when I got into this industry and what it kind of is now. Like the more, when you have those reps all over the country and you're helping set up shops, I mean, you're literally, it's like the concept of Walmart. If you get a product in Walmart, I mean, yeah, you're going to be making less on your initial, like, what you would make off of it, but you're also selling 10 times what you would because they have that dealer network, right?
Yes.
So when they help set up all these dealers and they help solve that problem of, like, some dude's a master tech and he can't deal with that owner's bullshit anymore at Harley, so he opens his own place and now he has the ability to go get everything he needs to do his job.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So
it's funny, like back then in the 70s and 80s, when the stuff got tough economically and everything, the guys would quit their jobs and open up a shop.
Yeah.
So we actually did well as NEMPCO. We actually did well when the times were tough because there was new shops going in.
Yeah.
And of course you had to be careful. And we were really focused. We weren't the biggest, but we made sure we had it. So again, you talk about my problem solving. I was able to, and what I went to college for was about business and inventory control.
Yeah.
So we used to have a 95% shipping rate. When it was the original NEMPCO, we had this. We didn't have everything, but what we had, we had.
Yeah.
So we could ship it, and we were very accurate. My partner Larry he developed the first UPS invoices that came up automatically and stuff like that for the motorcycle industry. So we had some neat little things going on too, But it was it was really a fun time.
Yeah.
You go to the trade shows, you go to the rallies. I mean, the rallies were just absolutely bizarre. They were just crazy, wide open.
So were you pretty active at like Laconia, those type of things?
Oh yeah, that was my home show.
Yeah.
I mean, even back when I had that first distribution company that was mostly Jap stuff, I remember running a breakfast for Dick Betancourt, John's father, because Dick was good friends with Malcolm Smith, and he was nationally known too. He had one of the first Honda dealerships in the area and stuff. So we had a breakfast for him, and we did stuff. But Laconia, I'd go up there with my brothers and my father. There was actually about 4 or 5 years when my father and my two brothers and I got to ride to Laconia together.
That's cool.
We each had our own bike. I got him back into bikes. He had a bad wreck at one time. I think that's why he didn't want me to get into it.
Oh, yeah.
And but I got him back into bikes, and that was some of the best times when we were all riding up to Laconia together. But,
what year was this? Probably in late 70s?
Oh, it must have been late 70s, late 70s, early 80s maybe.
What was the rally like back then?
Oh, okay. So there was the old track, and in front of the, Wares Beach was a little bit further away where everybody was partying and getting crazy, but the road in front of the racetrack is where all the clubs were.
Yeah.
And there'd be drag racing, and then behind the track, I mean, was just all the club guys too, partying and everything like that. They actually 1970 I can't remember the exact date, but they closed Laconia down because it got so bad one year. And you'd go back there, man, and I mean, they were pulling gold wings off the street and setting them on fire. And my
That's how to be a Honda dealer, huh?
I'm the small guy in the family, and my youngest brother was 6'5", 350 with no fat on him, and the partying was just off the wall, just totally off the wall, and it was crazy. I had a lot of good connections and stuff, and people knew who I was and everything even back then, so I could walk back there and guys started to get too fresh or something when my wife was around or something. I'd say, "Hey man, cool it,"
Yeah.
It was cool, but it was just off the wall crazy.
Yeah. Did you mainly do like Laconia instead of like East Coast stuff like Daytona? Or?
Yeah. My first Daytona was 1972, I think, and back then I was worked worked on a pit crew for John. He was super bike racing then. But during the day, it was, I think back then it was Jim Beam, bottle of Jim Beam in the morning for breakfast. And then you go, as long as you were awake for the races and stuff, you were okay. But, and Daytona was a different deal, too.
I mean, how much less populated was Daytona around that time? Because, I mean, it seems like when these, like, towns that these rallies are associated in, when they kind of become bigger or more, suburbanized, if you will, it kind of makes it hard for the rallies to exist in it.
Yeah, well, Daytona's a good example because it was, and Daytona's always been kind of a rough town.
Okay.
Drug situation, just crime in general. Daytona's a rough area. But it's also been a beach town, but it was really, it's always been the party place.
Yeah.
And, I mean, back in the old days, I mean, there'd be hookers walking down the street. There'd be girls flashing everywhere and stuff like that. It was just off the charts,
Yeah.
But as it grew, as condos started to be developed, probably, I don't know, mid-'80s or stuff, you started to see some development there.
Yeah.
And then what we've seen over the past few years, Rossmeyer, I mean, there used to be the old Robinson shop on International going out towards the track.
Yeah.
And then, what's his name? They opened up the shop on Beach Street, the Harley shop.
Back then or recently?
No. Back then, it was probably, late 80s, early 90s. He opened up the shop. Bruce Rossmeyer. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a little older. But so Bruce Rossmeyer opened up that shop on Beach Street, and there was there used to be 4 or 5 places in Daytona you'd go to.
Yeah.
And every place was busy and jamming and stuff, and Beach Street became really big. Well, now there's a big condo development on Beach Street. There's nothing on Beach Street now.
Yeah.
That's just another example. And really, there's Main Street and then new destination Harley out on Route 1 and 95.
Yeah.
And there's not a whole lot of other activity deals. You got the Cabbage Patch or whatever that is going down that way, but that's not.
It's like you have to wait in almost like school zones, to let kids get off buses while you're, it feels off when you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It's not as fluid as it used to be. And that's, and it's funny, it's more acceptable now, motorcycles and stuff, but the property values go up and these guys want to make money and they put up condos and they don't want people running motorcycles. And you got older people buying these condos in Florida anyways, that's part of that deal. Luckily we don't have that situation in Sturgis. They welcome us, with open arms, and
we're the circus that comes through.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And we're also the financial backing that comes through. I mean, there's people that'll rent their house for a month and pay for the mortgage for the entire year,
Exactly,
so, and now with Christy Nome, we're even
I watched Rot Rally here just fall apart. You know what I mean? Austin as a city just got way too big for that rally to exist within it.
Yep. Same deal. I was involved in the Rot Rally when I was with American Iron Horse.
Yeah.
We sponsored the concerts there every year, and we would put on a big party there too. And then later on, I ended up running the AMD World Championship bike shows at the Rot Rally.
That's when we met, I think.
Yeah, right up until the time when they sold, when Jerry and Colleen finally sold the thing. But they were struggling. I mean, they were getting older too, and it was just.
What do you really think? Like, do you think it's culturally the structure of that event dated itself and younger people weren't attracted to it, or like how do you think? Or I don't know. I'm trying to formulate the question here, but that's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying, and I mean, and that was a big discussion. I'll tell you that was a big discussion. How do we bring the whole show thing changed? When I finally got out of the corporate world of motorcycles, I just ran bike shows around the world.
Yeah,
and that was real. That was fun for me, and I enjoyed that. But that whole thing started to change with these invitational shows, And when I ran bike shows, we were paying out pretty good money.
Oh yeah.
You know, I was sending people to Europe and paying for all their expenses. You know, you'd win 10 grand, 12 grand at a show for first place. It was a whole. So that money became tougher to get available, and I think at that time, the invitational shows started coming up. Really, the first one to hit big, I think, was Born Free in California. And that was more that younger vibe, and it was kind of funny, which I didn't understand why Roth didn't do so good, because it was that younger, free vibe, you know, that went on and stuff like that. But we talked about, do we have the right music? You know, of course they had the crazy trail in the back,
the nude mile.
yeah. And I don't know if that was attractive or not to younger people.
The way me and Danger Dan like to put it, we're not going there for that, but since it's there, we're gonna go ahead and check it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
You know,
and I mean, the years I went there, you know, I've been to Woodstock, man.
Yeah.
You know, so I've seen a lot of stuff going on and everything, and we did a lot of those kind of things when I was a kid. So that never even concerned. It wasn't a big deal for me to go, you know, run that loop in the back there. But a lot of people, you know, that was a big deal for them.
Yeah.
Get their golf carts, run through there, and do whatever. In fact, one of the last years, when I'd run the show, you know, I kind of, like I said, I've been around a lot, did a lot of things, so I usually set up my camper outside where we would do the shows.
Yeah.
And it was right across from where they'd have the concerts, so I could listen to the concert, sip my bourbon, and kind of, you know, just not get all involved and go crazy. Well, after one of the last shows, they came back to me and they said, "Bob, you got to give us a ride through the crazy mile thing, you know, like that." And I go, "No, you really don't want me to do that." And this is about midnight, so I'm feeling pretty buzzed. I go, "Okay." So they had one of those golf carts that holds like 10 people.
Yeah.
We got in the thing. I never took my foot off the gas. We went through that thing. We were scraping some things. We were passing drinks around and going.
Yeah.
And got them back, and they go, "Okay, we don't need another ride."
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I don't know, that level of craziness. I really, it was hard to say, and we just couldn't figure it out. We had younger people working for us and doing different things, and then when they sold it to the hot rod guy, he just, you know, it just went away. He tried to have it at different places, and that didn't work. The track was not the place to have it.
They reached out to me at one point about like having a conversation about it, and I told them that you're fighting a stigma now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you'd be better, other than the email like chain that you just bought of all these existing people that have come to Rot Ride that you can promote a new event to. You need a new name, and you need a new location that has a rural aspect but can handle, you know, 20, 30,000 people coming into town.
Yeah.
And Austin just isn't it anymore. You know?
Well, and downtown Austin, you're absolutely right. I mean, I refuse to go to Austin.
Yeah.
You know, it's like New York City.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It really is. The traffic is 24/7. You know, it's just not. There's just
it's too much going on.
Yeah, too much going on. Exactly.
Yeah, you know, and I want to get, you know, I want to come back to your bike show world, because I think there's a lot of really important things about the shows and how you did them that I think the world, we may not ever see bike shows like that again in the industry. That's kind of a sad thing, but to kind of get back on the timeline a little bit. Right before you basically sell this company, like, so you sold the company and it became Tucker Rocky, or did Tucker Rocky buy it, or how does that work?
Tucker Rocky bought it.
Okay. And what was Tucker Rocky originally? Was it more sport bikes? Or
Yeah,
like
it was. They had tried to get into the Rocky Cycles. Originally, there was Tucker and there was Rocky, two different companies. Bob Nichols started Tucker. He bought it from Ed Tucker. Ran a business out of a bowling alley in the back, and mostly oil and stuff like that. He bought it and grew it like crazy. Joe Piazza and the Piazza family was really big with Rocky Cycles.
Yeah.
When I used to have the 7 or 8 shops, I used to buy truckloads of Bell helmets from them.
Okay.
In fact, when I sold, we were sitting at the table one time at one of the meetings. He goes, "Oh, you're that guy that I used to give helmets away to." I mean, it's, hey, we're going to buy 700 helmets. You know, I need the price. But so we were doing pretty good, and they approached us. A lot of our dealers said they wanted to get in the Harley business. So Rocky first tried to get into the Harley business, and there was a company called NEMPCO that made all the repap parts for the early bikes.
Yeah.
The brake drums, the levers, all that stuff, and they were making it out of Taiwan. And they weren't a very good company. It was really hard to get parts from them. And then and dealing with Taiwan back then was kind of new. Taiwan is actually pretty decent right now. You know, they've really grown a lot. But back then, it was kind of like dealing with China a few years ago. You know, this stuff wasn't proven. So, but NEMPCO, if you wanted those old brake drums and those old parts and stuff, you had to buy NEMPCO, and you had to buy enough of it when it was available. Otherwise, you knew you were going to run out, and that was the only game in town. So everybody was trying to buy them from them. So Rocky had purchased a trailer load of NEMPCO stuff. They tried to get into the business. They weren't Harley. They didn't understand it. They didn't understand the people. It was really, we were really tight knit then, the Harley group. And they ended up, I would have paid them a premium for that stuff, and they ended up selling it for like pennies on the dollar, you know. But so they got out. They didn't know what they were doing. So then Tucker acquired Rocky. It became Tucker Rocky. And they said, okay, we got to get back in the Harley business. You know, there's always that allure of the Harley business. And they hired a guy from Custom Chrome, and they were starting Thunder Road or something like that, they were going to call it, and get into the Harley business and be their brand. Well, that was the wrong guy. Yeah. You know, he just didn't know and didn't understand that whole thing I was telling you about, the efficiencies and keeping the stuff. And he had some good, he was a marketing guy, not really an operations guy. So they realized that was going nowhere. They were losing money. So they approached us. And I said, well, we're not really interested in selling. Things were going really well. I had earned my third of the company. Things were jamming. We're feeling really good. And they kept coming at us. So I said, we'll talk to you. Anyways, they finally came up with a good number. And we were clean. We had no ghosts in the closets, nothing like that. So the sale went down in, I think, 60 days. Damn. And I think in October they started talking to us. We December 31st we closed. And January 2nd I did a presentation to 600 people on Harley parts. I literally went through by that time we had about a 300-page catalog. Yeah. And I sat up on stage. I made sure everybody had a catalog and went through teaching them about Harley parts.
So did they keep you on board to basically run that side of the business at some point?
Yeah. My partner and his brother, they got out of it. They retired. My deal was for 5 years to become vice president of Tucker Rocky, general manager of Bikers. Then they called it Bikers Choice. Bikers Choice, They had switched that over. And I actually stayed with them for 10 years. We grew it. I mean, it was growing. We had the money we needed. Yeah. We could buy the parts. We were sourcing new stuff. I hired some good people. We had a great crew.
I mean, it felt like for the longest time it was Tucker and Parts were the only real like major players.
Yeah. By then, Custom Chrome had faded away. They had gone through their investor thing, trying to go public, and that just ruins a company.
Yeah, it feels like you need a much bigger company than like what's in the motorcycle world a lot of times, you know?
Yeah,
to be in that kind of like stocks and bonds and that type of shit.
And when you get into that, it's always this deal. Oh, you guys are bikers. Yeah, you're enthusiasts, but you don't really know how to run a business. We're going to show you how to run a business.
Yeah, they don't understand the business of motorcycles. So then what it is, it's just about spreadsheets. And it's not about the customer. It's not about service. It's about, bottom line, profit and loss statements, and that's it. And once you have a board, you're responsible to them. You have a fiduciary, I think is the word, obligation that your job is to make them profit, and that's it.
Yeah.
This kind of ties into just maybe a more modern conversation with current dealers and things like that with like Harley Davidson, you know, the franchises, right? That a lot of them are owned by massive auto groups, and they have these people that come in that do not understand the fact that you're selling a passion-based purchase, not a necessity of any kind of need. You know what I mean?
That's one of the problems Harley's having these days.
And it's a passion-based purchase that nobody else in your family gets to enjoy. You go buy a boat, your kids get to go ride on it, your wife gets to go ride on it, all your friends want to come ride on it, you know. You buy a motorhome, you know. You buy a jet ski, it seems even more, you know, helpful to the rest of the family. But you buy a motorcycle, you have the death aspect of it. You know, you could die or lose something a lot quicker or easier than you would on a boat, maybe. And then most of the motorcycle stuff becomes like a selfish endeavor of a recreational vehicle. You know what I mean?
You know, yeah, I do understand that. I am really privileged for the woman that I've married.
Yeah.
We've just celebrated our 52nd anniversary.
That's amazing. Congratulations on that.
And as you saw in that picture, she's been there from the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, and she actually helped us out with that first shop. And we decided we really probably shouldn't work together. But
it was almost a 3-year marriage.
Yeah. She's let me go every which way. You know, we're both retired now, so we're spending time together. And she'll tell you, I mean, I wasn't home that much.
Yeah.
I was doing rallies. I was doing shows. I was literally traveling all over the world. I've been to Europe, Asia. I've been all over the place. So having somebody like that understands is it's special.
Yeah.
But I think you're right in what you were saying, that not everybody has that, or they get jealous of it, or they feel that you're not giving the family the full attention. I mean, we used to do Laconia. And we'd party at Laconia too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd run a bike show at Laconia. I ran the show there for charity, give the money back to the local area. I had vendors pitch in and stuff, nice little show and stuff. But when the show was over, man, we would party like crazy.
Yeah.
And I'd come home, and it was always on Father's Day. So I'd get home Father's Day about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you know. I'd be kind of tired, a little blown out and stuff, but I had to do the father thing, you know, and I did. My daughter, she was real understandable, but you need to have the family to support you in this kind of effort, because it's not always good.
Yeah.
I mean, there's times when it's a tough business, you know.
Well, you had said something earlier about like, you know, talking about the first dealerships and how they had the winter would come, and I think the North knows this way more than the South does, because you kind of have to prepare for winter and the shortcomings of financial opportunities until at least after Christmas, right? Well, just with that, and like I feel like some businesses they structure themselves not to kind of like thin themselves out for the winter, right? They just bloat themselves, and then they make more money, so they staff up or they do whatever to, and then they have to, you know, they can't just like be fluid and kind of get through the tough times.
And you made the point of my ability to figure things out. And most of these shops that I took over in Boston when I was a kid, they had failed. You know, because they were doing just what you were saying. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we did was during the season we would run 6 days a week, and we would be open 9 to 5 a couple of days in the beginning of the week, then 9 to 9, and Saturdays 9 to 5. And we'd have a full crew. And I think one of the things that really helped me in the corporate world is every year I had to get rid of some really good people.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're doing that, you know, you still want to get your best people. But what we did in the winter is we would go to 5 days a week and run 10 to 10 and run one shift of people. So I'd run the full store with maybe 4 or 5 people.
Yeah.
And that was fine. And, you know, you were pushing all the time, but you were getting paid. You know, you're supposed to. You're not supposed to take it easy and stuff like that. And a lot of people didn't do that, and that's why a lot of them had that. You have to adjust. It has to make sense.
So I feel like a lot of people overcompensated for the rush and boom of the aftermarket sales that was taking place in essentially 2020 and 21, and then when, you know, I think a lot of that kind of bit people in the ass in the last year and a half when, you know, inflation hit and all these other things. And it's just been, I've heard of a lot of brands, you know, not trying to name anything specifically, but I've heard a lot of brands struggling to kind of keep up with shit, and then Harley drops a new bike with new part numbers and models, and the old pegs don't work, the old grips don't work. Now you got to tool new shit. So it's like a big wrench in the mix of the new bikes to stay current with what Harley's bringing out, but which means you got to invest another 50, 60 grand into these little small parts, you know.
And they're not selling as many bikes.
Exactly. So it's kind of it's one of those things where sometimes maybe it doesn't benefit you to be the first one to have a new part for the new bike. You know what I mean?
You know, now some of the guys that are doing specific things, seats, wheels, etc., whatever the deal, it's a little bit tougher for them. But one of the things I recognized when I was working at Tucker was that we didn't have to be the first ones out, just like you said.
Yeah.
And basically what Harley's model back then was they'd load you up as much as they could. They'd finance your insurance. They'd finance your leathers. They'd finance the bike. They put everything in that package and say, hey, it's the monthly payment. You know, if you can meet that, you're cool. At one point, they also wrote loans for people with 500 credit scores, you know, which was a problem. But but we realized that. So what that meant was it was a year or two before you really had a chance at that market.
Okay.
And it's when that guy had kind of, because there was a lot of new people getting in then. So you had to realize they didn't know what you know, what I know. They didn't have that exposure to all these different parts. Mm-hmm. So you had to give them a chance to go to a few rallies, see a few things, say, I'd like that, explain to them how it works and what the deal was.
Yeah.
And then you could go at them and have the different parts and things. And you know, it's just.
Would you say that, like, maybe after the buyback from AMF is kind of like the beginning of the motorcycles becoming much more of a accepted in society kind of like time frame? Because it seems like going into the 90s it became, you know, the doctor and lawyer bike, you know, the fat boy, they want one like Arnold or, you know, Brian Bosworth or something like that. It had to, for them to make a movie about it, there has to be something going on permeating in the ether to where they're like, you know what, I think there might be a market to expose this and then go that way, you know.
The problem there was, I think Harley's major mistake there was they really lost some momentum because they backed away from their core customer in the 90s because of the doctors and the lawyers and all that stuff going on. There was tremendous growth. The economy was like booming. Everybody had money. Yeah. You know, it doesn't matter what business you were in. You were making money back then.
Seems like a lot of, I don't know if the word fringe, but like subcultures, whether it's hot rodding or low riding, you know, motorcycles. Like it seems like all these subcultures had a skyrocketing boom to where, you know, then you go into 2000, you get Fast and Furious. You know, import cars are now a new hot trend, and all the motorcycle stuff. So yeah, the economy in the 90s paved way for all this, you know, media enthusiasm around these subcultures.
There was, in motorcycles, we used to call it was a real like sexy appeal. Mm-hmm. You know, like you were tough, you were cool, you know, you had your motorcycles, and Harley they kind of backed away from the core guys. I'm really discouraging some of them from even coming into the shops. Like, oh, we got the problem they made, and I've seen it time and time again, is they think this boom is going to go on forever.
Yeah.
I saw that at American Iron Horse.
Yeah.
I saw Harley do that. That's what the guys are dealing with right now. You got to remember, like you were talking about, when COVID hit, a lot of people had free time. Bike sales were actually pretty good.
Yeah.
During that period, and people, because it was something you could go out and do and get away and be alone and not be
free time and free money. When you pump money artificially into a market and you don't have anything really to go spend it on, you're going to spend it on toys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you recognize that, you would have been, and see, that's what Drag Specialties is really good at. They really had a good handle. Fred was an amazing guy, you know, when his foresight and what he did and the way he put that company together. And he didn't get fooled by all these things, you know. Mm-hmm. He had a system put together that he would give something new a shot, but he wouldn't go crazy. If it worked, fine, then he would give it everything it needed. If it didn't work, he'd just get rid of it and move on to the next thing. But the boom never goes on forever, and you got to keep that in the back of your mind. And when you don't, you might miss out on a few sales, but you could be in for the long term if you just and put a little money away. So, put 20% away and put 30% into new products, and then keep your business going.
Yeah.
Whatever the formula is. But
instead, a lot of people buy 18-wheelers.
yeah.
And
how many have those 18-wheelers now? You can buy them pretty cheap,
Yeah. I think some of them were just permanently stuck in Sturgis in different places. Like they couldn't even afford to get them home.
But that's happened time and time again, where the boom has fooled people. The 90s were crazy. I mean, they really were, because, everybody had money. And, the big joke was the master builders. A guy would hire somebody to build a bike for him, and then he never really did it, but he wanted to be out front. He wanted to be on the TV shows and all this. I mean, they're legitimate builders. They really are. Those are the guys that are still around now.
Yeah.
But all those other guys, they were just fake.
Well, but think about it. Think about who you're selling, air quotes, master builder to. The guy that doesn't have any tenure in motorcycles.
Yeah.
The guy that has the ability to buy it, which not to outcast and say that person is like, we don't need. No, we need those guys. Those are the guys that keep our industry alive, right? But they're the easy one to sell to, especially when you have all these celebrity-esque kind of individuals building bikes and getting put on those pedestals and platforms.
Yeah.
And yeah, then you have a lot of fakesters coming around and, using the terminology, and they have the look, they have whatever the charisma or machismo that needed to be to sell to that demographic of people. And then you almost had the bubble of the chopper, craze.
Well, and you had all the new companies coming in.
Yeah.
There was during the 90s, there was probably 100 American-made motorcycle companies.
Oh yeah,
easily.
And I think I've already kind of got to the bottom of this, but it a lot of that, not as a result of directly, but subsequently, a lot of the whole chopper craze was also on the people wanted V-twin motorcycles and they couldn't get them from Harley.
Right.
And so it opens the door for custom made stuff. And, that kind of ushered into that whole late 90s, early 2000s crazy boom.
Yeah. My story there is, so in 2002, I had finally got tired of Takaraki. My deal was I knew bikes, I knew the parts, but I also knew the business end of things.
And you knew the culture too, because you were out there doing it.
Yeah. So guys made mistakes like Takaraki and other companies like what they did is they didn't know. They would sell you'd buy a set of Fat Bob tanks and they'd sell you half a tank, because they didn't know the guys didn't know them back, or they didn't have a package right and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I knew that when you cut back on parts, you couldn't just go by numbers.
Yeah.
I was given the task to reduce the inventory and but still hopefully grow sales. Mm-hmm. So you still needed an intake valve and an exhaust valve to build a motor.
Yeah.
So and there may be some items where you only need a couple. There's only a couple things you're buying from that guy, but they're important to the industry, important to the culture. Mm-hmm. So I was able to make sure we had the parts to do the builds, make sure we had the little things, even though it was a small vendor, to do that. And at that time, I think I cut the inventory by close to $1 million and still grew sales by 8%. And I said, listen, man, I want to do this for the rest of the company. I am not just a Harley guy. I know this. If you want me to stick around, let me be a little more involved and stuff like that. And I had some good guys working for me to carry things on. And they go, nah, we can handle the other thing like that. We want you to stick around. You got a good reputation.
Yeah, but does being connected to the metric scene as well through the kind of the umbrella of Takaraki as a whole, if they're struggling on that end, that still affects you guys, right?
So my point is, I did this deal, and I said, with the thinking that I'm going to put this back into Biker's Choice.
Yeah.
To make, to help us grow. And they go, no, we're going to take that and put it on the other side.
Oh, yeah, fuck that.
Well, that's what I said. See
Yeah.
you later. And that's all history and fine and well. But that's the problem when these corporate guys that, like you were saying, it's the bottom line. They're looking at numbers without understanding what those parts represent.
Yeah.
And I've seen that in a bunch of businesses, you know. And same thing with American Iron Horse, you know. They thought that the boom was going to go on forever. I go, no, it's not. You know, I mean, we need to be prepared and have some we had all kinds of equipment. We could build a line of accessories. There's a lot of different things we could do. No, we're just going to cut back and grow bikes.
I remember, you know, because I grew up in the same town that Joe Martin's shop was in right over here in Duncanville. So I'm in high school, and literally this dude's building, you know, badass, you know, choppers.
Oh yeah, Martin Brothers did really good in the 90s.
You know, I when I first got into the motorcycling, I had a few conversations with him, and we know of each other. I'm an airbrush guy; he's an airbrush guy. You know, so we dabbled in that. But you know, I noticed something, and I couldn't tell you that it was like indefinitely, but I think from what I understood, you know, when he had this whole pipes business, like the Martin Brothers pipes, for a good amount of time, everybody wanted a set of Martin Brothers pipes on their bike.
Absolutely.
And it was unique. I thought it was pretty unique that he found a partner to partner with exhaust. Like he had this dentist essentially that invested money in the exhaust so that side of the business can grow or whatever. But when the pipes kind of became not in style anymore, that guy, the dentist, isn't invested in Martin Brothers as a whole.
Right.
He's invested in this, like this side, this little fraction of the business. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I thought that was a unique and very, just a smart way to go about doing things, because, you know, to stay competitive in the parts thing before the internet, I think you had more time to kind of live out parts and styles. But now with the internet, you see the bike that is being built for Daytona now, a month before it's done. It's almost old news when it shows up in Daytona. And then the shelf life of these bikes don't have the same staying power they did 20 years ago.
See, you bring up a really interesting point there. The trade shows used to be a more important part of the deal.
Yeah.
So the trade shows is when you introduce the new product. And you would kind of go and that was always like in February.
Yeah, V-Twin Expo. I remember we used to go to that one every year.
Yep. So and it had been that, you know, the original Cincinnati was for the entire industry. Then they had Indianapolis, but they were in February for a reason. So you would be working on your catalog and finishing that up in the fall. You'd incorporate the new parts that you know you could have delivery for by January.
Yeah.
You'd introduce them at the show, and then what we used to do is in the fall we would have a fall dating program that had to be the stuff that the guys needed for the winter to work on the bikes, to store the bikes, whatever like that, and they had to pay that off. Like I don't remember exactly what it was, December, January, February, something like that. Then we'd have another dating program, spring dating program for all the new stuff and the stuff they wanted to stock up for the winter. I mean, for the season, and they wouldn't have to pay for that till April, May, June. And the value of that was the guys didn't. Some of the companies would do spring dating in the fall, and the problem is the small shops that weren't really sophisticated, they would sell those parts by January. They'd use that money to survive, and then they wouldn't be able to pay their bills. You know, so you had to kind of help the guys along. So, anyways, that time there was no internet then, so that timing was real important about when you did stuff, when you introduced parts. Then you had to order it, you had to allow for that timing of the ordering. But now, just what you said, everything is instantaneous.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they have the trade show now. There's the one trade show, but it really doesn't have anything to do with us.
Yeah, AIM Expo. So it's more. It seems more like manufacturer trade show, like for the, you know, like the parts that are kind of like non-specific to motorcycle, like not a Harley thing or a metric thing, more like, hey, we're a headset company, we're a helmet company, we're you know, Honda,
electric bicycles, etc.
So I mean, you kind of wonder, did the trade show concept inflate itself to the point where, you know, you're having to pay $3,200 to be at, you know, just for a vendor space at V-Twin Expo, or you can spend $3,200 on your own social media marketing, and it's going to go to the dealers anyway. It's going to, because they're all, you know what I mean? It's like, in a way, I like the idea of the trade show, because I think that the more, when you get an industry together that communicates at trade shows, or I mean, you're at the bar afterwards. You're I mean, the one and only time I ever had a conversation with Arlen Ness, and I'm very close with his family now, was at V-Twin Expo in that hotel that's connected to the place in Cincinnati, at a bar. And you know, I cherish that moment, you know, because I asked a really fucking simple question because I didn't know what else to say to this dude. You know what I mean? But you know, that's kind of like what those are for. It's not just to be on the floor and see the products, but maybe to your point of like the industry felt tighter then.
Well, and that was the value of the trade shows.
Yeah.
And what's lacking now is that what we need to do right now is put the whole industry together. Mm-hmm. And they're, you know, God bless them, AIM Expo is trying.
Yeah, yeah.
They really are. They got some things going on, but they're missing the whole point. And the big issue right now is the separation between the manufacturers and the independent dealers. And AIM Expo is funded by the manufacturers. So there's a little bit of a conflict there. And I don't know how we resolve that. We need a show where we're such a small industry.
Yeah, small. Yeah.
And we've always been. Even during the 90s, we were still, you know, 2% of the GDP or whatever, you know. Yeah. So we need to all work together on the things that we can, especially on legislation and different things. And but they have these, you know, they get funded by the OEs. I mean, it's really pretty simple. They get all the money. So, and then there's some basic things. If you look at, you know, we'll talk a little bit more about right to repair and stuff like that, and some of the basic conflicts of that. I don't know where it comes together. I really don't.
We're definitely going to get in all of this. Like I said, I'm very excited to have you on because there's so much useful information and just like what you've done, like your path in this, but also how you know so much about how this inner working works. But still in the conversation about like kind of the trade shows, the internet, the separation of dealers and or manufacturers, even if it's a small parts manufacturer, like, you know, even though they're pretty big and, you know, they're growing every day, like a brand like Thrash and Supply, who their model for how they're marketing and bringing their stuff out is completely opposite of what I think legacy wise would have been from any other brand. You know, they do their YouTube channel, they promote their products, and they talk about their new products on their own YouTube channel, which they're getting paid on YouTube to sell products essentially. They do their own photography. They create all their own content around their products, and they don't necessarily need to rely on. I mean, they're in drag, but they don't have to rely on drag.
Right.
They don't have to rely on almost any other aspect that's been around to help dealers get their feet off the ground.
I think that's changed because now so many companies are direct to consumer. Like, yeah, you can still get them from drag, but the consumer can go directly to the manufacturer and buy it now.
Well, and the beauty of that is the distributor's responsibility was never to market the product. The distributor's responsibility was to have the product available at a higher quantity than you could afford to keep on hand.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really what distribution's all about.
It's kind of like, it's almost like the investment you would get from becoming public.
Yeah.
To go, so, you know, drag's coming in and they're buying enough product for you to do a bigger run of the product so that they can have it on the shelf to sell. Therefore, it's not your money coming out of your pockets. Yeah. I understand that now. Yeah.
And the way, like what Thrash and Supply is doing is it's a different world with social media and the internet right now. And the way you want to do, if you want to develop products now, it's up to you to create the demand. So you create the demand with the public, then they're going to go to the dealer. The public will create the demand for the dealer. And if there's enough dealers that want it, then the dealer will create the demand for the distributor.
Yeah, yeah.
So it really, so that's really the way. The big, and that's not going to change. It's a new world.
It looks different, but it's the same. It's the same path, right?
Yeah, and I, you know, I'm lost with a lot of this. I don't even do Zelle and Venmo, man. You know, I mean, I still write checks. You know, but what's missing though is that brotherhood.
Yeah,
the culture is deteriorating, and that's my concern because that's the culture is what's driven me for the past 60 years, 50 years, you know? I mean, it's that culture and what's unique about it, what separates us. I don't know what people do with their lives that aren't involved with motorcycles.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'm retired right now, but I'm out in my barn every day working on a motorcycle.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, or I bought a new trailer and I'm setting it up to carry motorcycles. Or I'm trying to work a deal and I'm doing this thing with the IMA because I can,
Yeah.
you know, and that's totally volunteer to put something back into motorcycles. I don't know of anything else that has that kind of love or draw. And there's look at you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, I see that same thing in you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're driving across country, now you want to get some of that feel that we had when we were younger. So you're building a shovel head.
Yeah.
What other industry? I mean, maybe some of the hot rod guys.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they're into that too, but boat guys aren't into that. Water ski guys
It's a very
aren't
niche
into
market when you're. I'm into 1940 cigarette boats. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many guys are like that? You
Well,
know?
you know, I think before we go into this this part
Yeah.
of the conversation about the right to repair and just that part of the aftermarket, I think it's really important that you and I I like to know this. Once you got involved there, so after you got out of Tucker Rocky, did you immediately get involved with doing the bike shows and things like that? And how did that transpire?
Well, I had, but when I left Tucker Rocky, I got involved there was still the custom bike thing. Factory customs, for lack of a better word. That's what we called them at the time because Harley wasn't supplying.
Yeah.
So from Tucker Rocky, I went to American Iron Horse. From American Iron Horse, I went to Hard Bikes. And that was the custom. And what I was able to do there, like when I started at American Iron Horse, they had like a tool bin in the middle of the floor.
Yeah.
And two girls could pick the parts, and they were the only one to know where any parts were, if they did. And then the guys, one guy would build a bike, or one team would build a bike from beginning to end. So I was able to go there and set up bin locations. I did. They were killing themselves on they offered all these different colored frames when it was probably 6 colors that sold 80% of the bikes.
Yeah.
So I would stock those 6 colors, and the other ones I'd say you have a 10-week waiting period.
Yeah.
Which was fine by then because we were so efficient. And then they had build sheets, so the girls would pick the parts, they'd know where to get them, and then we set up separate teams to do individual parts of the build, so you could train somebody off the street to do that. I'm kind of like an old Henry Ford kind of deal, that. And then a very similar thing with hard bikes. The problem with that, it was getting to be kind of late. So 2000 hit. 2000 was kind of the peak. Yeah. With the 100-year anniversary. I mean, everybody was just so excited about that. I mean, and we were in Milwaukee there for that anniversary and stuff, and it was just a really big deal, and Harley built up for it. And Harley didn't actually do enough, in my opinion. They came out with their 100th anniversary models, but it was just regular models with different paint on it.
Yeah. Well, they did the whole thing with Ford. That was a nice truck.
Yeah. Well, I got mine here. I brought that down tonight. But
well, I stepped my foot in the door of this industry in January of 2004. So, you're talking 100 years. If they were doing it like they were back then, that was August, right after Sturgis thing that they were doing. We're still releasing the bikes on that kind of schedule.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm right on the back end of that, coming into this. And, I'm working but under Rick Fairless at a paint shop.
Right.
You know what I mean? And, bro, did that open my eyes because he was just now kind of not just getting into it, but he was starting to get the opportunities with Biker Build Off and all that shit at the same time. So,
right.
But go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to just throw in some context in there.
Well, so 2003 became the peak of that, because at the turn of the century, they from 2000 on, they were building up to 2003, and that whole deal, and they were going for that. And I think they were still, I don't know if they were holding back or they just weren't able to ramp up enough because we were still building a lot of bikes then. I really don't understand why they didn't ramp up more earlier. And so I don't know, whatever the deal was, whatever. But that happened. And it kind of lost some of the momentum after that. And then 2005, things started to get crazy, economy-wise. Harley had been all through the 90s and up through that 2005 about, they'd been writing bikes. If you could make the monthly payment, you were in.
Yeah.
We used to go to, with American Iron Horse, we used to go to Sturgis and Daytona. We'd rent a city block, and we'd sell 600 or 700 bikes in a 2-week period.
Damn, that many?
And we had 3 people writing loans, and it was like, okay, the chopper thing, it was back to that. This guy wanted to take out the local stripper or something, so he'd trade in his bike, get a chopper, and if he could meet the monthly payment, and it didn't matter if he had a 500 credit score, if it looked like he could do that on paper, they wrote the loan, the guy left his bike there and took off on the new bike.
What was the average price of these Iron Horse?
Back then, it was probably close to $40,000.
Yeah, so
as an average.
Man.
And then you had the special editions that went up more. I mean, it was guys like Perowitz and Donnie Smith and Arlen. They were selling bikes for $100,000.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy off the wall. So again, if you just paid attention, you knew that wasn't going to last. And American Iron Horse wanted to go public, and that was their death, because they just thought this was going to go on forever, and they set everything up to build this. Of course, they never went public because everything kind of died. So then we used to have. So when I started at American Iron Horse, the dealers didn't have lines of credit. I had there's a thing called a revolving line of credit.
Yeah.
So I had to teach the dealers about revolving lines of credit. I literally called their banks and said, we're going to sell this guy 10 bikes. When he sells one, he's going to pay for that, and then he's going to order another one. So we're going to, it's a revolving line of credit.
Yeah.
And whatever.
That way you can keep bikes in dealers.
Yeah. And we keep them in like that. We can plan because we know what the deal is and stuff like that. Well, they got this new guy in, and they made this deal with Textron or GE, whatever it was, and they paid for the bikes when we finished building them. And that was the beginning of the end, because then because their mindset was they're going to go on forever. They built all these bikes up. At one time, I think they had 700 bikes that couldn't sell in a warehouse in Kansas. Mm-hmm. Well, they weren't the only. So all that, what I'm getting to is that revolving line, that line of credit that they had for everybody dried up. So the dealers couldn't get credit. Mm-hmm. Then the consumers couldn't get credit. So all those bikes from everywhere just sat. Now, Harley had their own finance group, so that carried them for a little bit. And then in 2008, things got tough again. And that credit thing is what killed everything.
So the market crashed in 08?
Yeah.
So, I had heard that it also had a lot to do with the insurance. Like you had at the time, we were repairing and fixing Borgettes and all these bikes, right? And you'd have a insane, Mike Learn paint job on a Borgette, and the dude would drop it in Dallas, and we're sitting here touching up the frame and this airbrush and stuff. But if this is $100,000 bike and you drop it, who's to say it's not a $20,000 repair? And if that's your traditional insurance, you're not hitting that 70% mark, which would be $70,000. So you have all these like things that aren't like manufactured products that are on a wall that insurance companies can say, okay, well that's a Borgette tank. It's right there on the shelf. That's a 50 thing. This is, you know what I mean? You can just kind of name your price.
That was part of the deal, though. And at one point, you're right. But then at one point, they even put a limit on what the amount of insurance you could get for a custom bike. And at one point, it was ridiculous. It was like $15,000. And then if you could prove certain stuff and stuff like that. But that was a small part.
Oh, it was.
The big problem was the credit dried up. Mm. Nobody had that much cash around to cover everything. You got Textron and GE just drying up. They're just trying to cover their acts. You got 700 bikes. What is that worth at your cost of $28,000 or $30,000 sitting there? Yeah. And you got and you can't sell them to the dealer. Yeah. You can't afford to finance them. And so then there's silly deals going on. So you put a couple on the guy's floor without any credit to back it up, and then he goes out of business. So it snowballed, like you said, in 2008 with the market crash. Everything snowballed from there.
Well, I think then also, too, in 08, that's when they made, like, reforms to lending. So then it was like, But like you said, it was, hey man, as long as you can, kind of show on paper that you can make this payment, we're going to let it slide. Then it's like, no. We want verification.
Yeah.
And then it's a lot harder. It's way harder to get something approved.
Well, and so you cut your consumer base.
Yeah.
Probably by 60% with this deal.
Well, I definitely didn't know about that side of it. I guess I just, in my head, I remember when we had a shop full of people bringing choppers, and then it switched to baggers.
Yeah.
Because it was basically like, well, I was going to buy this chopper, but the insurance was going to cost 3 times the amount of the loan that I was going to have to get for it, or whatever the case may be, when I can just go get this bagger. And then you had guys like Yaffe and Covington and Ness has always had some products for baggers back in the day.
Yeah.
Then they were able to fix these things up, those stereos in them, and kind of boom, build this whole new market that became the big bagger scene.
Before the bagger deal, though, there was probably a 4-year period where you had to do whatever you had to do to get by.
Yeah.
And you had guys like Perowitz painting boosas. And, whatever you could get to. And bobbers became very popular because there wasn't much. It didn't take much. Yeah, they were stripped down. It didn't take a lot of money. So the custom industry never went away.
I mean, think about it. Like, the bobber came in right when the rat rod came in. And it's almost like hey, we're going to build an old hot rod, but we're going to, all the shit that costs a lot of money, the finish, the chrome and all that, we're going to just scratch that.
Yeah.
It went full circle. That's when the XS 650, all those bobbers were like, "Hey, these are cool. We're gonna do this, and you can do it yourself."
Yeah, it was first they went and did a lot of Triumphs, then the XS 650s came out, and that was like you guys.
Yeah,
I mean, basically, you still had that same mindset, but you didn't have the money, and it's still that same thing going through your head, and the same thrill when you're building it yourself, and somebody goes, "Well, that's cool," and you do something special that you've done yourself, but there wasn't as many of you.
So during that time, I had left that shop, and I was mainly customizing and fixing up sport bikes, like to the like the wide tires, not like racing them or anything, but just like really tricking them out for the visual appearance.
I had a lot more of them at the shows.
Yeah, and so basically I had that whole market here in kind of Texas for like 4 or 5 years, and it was good. And then the manufacturer started releasing motorcycles that meant, so like a Gixxer was the easiest bike to customize, because a Gixxer 600 and a Hayabusa essentially had the same frame swing arm diameter, the same linkage for the suspension. So most of these parts were interchangeable, just the way Harleys were. Right. And so if you made a set of lowering links, it worked on all the bikes. Or if you made a set of grips, it worked on all the bikes. You made this, it worked on all the bikes. And then in 2007, they changed the suspension. And then in 2008 or 2009, they changed it again. And the 600 and the 1000 wasn't the same. The Busa got totally revamped. And it killed the aftermarket. Then those bikes seemed to just stop selling as a whole. I think they stopped making a Gixxer 1000 for like 3 or 4 years. And I felt that coming. And that's when I started kind of getting the opportunity to go into the Harley thing on my own brand.
Right.
But those bikes were cheaper to build. Like a $10,000 build on one of those was kind of average. So we were kind of flying under the radar of, we had available cash, and a lot of drug dealers too.
Yeah.
Those guys, they had cash to pay for shit. We didn't even take credit cards, so it wasn't like they were coming in like swiping cards for rims. They were just, here's $3,000, here's $5,000.
Yeah, you buy the $2,500 GSXR, and then you can throw a paint job on it, and it's like, okay, you're in the game now.
Yeah.
Well, and like I said, there was a lot more of those that showed up at the shop. I mean, at the shows, one of my challenges is basically when we ran the IMS shows, we'd run like 4 classes. So we had you had your open class, you had your retro, and in the open class we had a street class, and I forget what the 4th one was, performance. So in the open class, I had those Gixxers and Busas competing against baggers.
Yeah.
Oh man, people used to drive them crazy. But I recognize when somebody did a really nice job on a boost and put the
Yeah.
time in it. I mean, they'd win sometimes, against a bagger that maybe had paint on it.
Yeah.
That did, because like what you're saying, the limitation of the cost.
Yeah.
So that was just, it was a really interesting time. And, oh man, I used to get in some arguments and I had to deal. I said, but this is the deal, I mean.
Yeah, I've always said that competing in motorcycle shows brings out the worst in the individual.
Oh man, I can tell you all kinds of stories
I
like
can
that.
imagine. Dude. I don't like how I am whenever I put my bike in a show. You become a little judgy, like, oh man, I think my bike's better than that. Or, oh, you just as soon as you sign that sheet, my mind switches from, oh, I'm so happy to see everybody. Your bike's really badass, man. I love your bike. To, man, fuck that bike.
Oh, no, it's I mean, I've had things, and I've always been. I tell it like it is, and I don't back down from anything.
Yeah.
I had 4 guys one time at a show. They weren't happy with the results, and they started heckling me during the presentation. I was cool. I just stopped for a second, and then I continued my presentation. And when that was over, I went over to them and go, so what's your problem, man?
Yeah.
I thought they were going to whack me or something. They were big guys, I said, I'm telling you, this is the deal, because they were saying it was throwing the show, that something like that. I said, no, that's not the case.
Yeah.
This is the deal. It is very personal.
Yeah.
But what I've learned over doing these shows all the years, you got to be upfront, and I have finally developed a judging system that can be totally transparent that we used in some of the bigger shows that we've done, like the Golden Bolt and stuff like that. And it's so nice when you can sit there at the end and say, you got a problem with it? Come down, I'll show you the sheets. We can talk about it. I'll let you know why you didn't do it or what you have to do for next time.
Yeah.
But that took years to kind of
Develop it.
figure out how to do that,
So I guess I kind of cut you off there, but how did you get into that space? Like, was it the last run after Iron Horse? Or
So
the hard bikes?
I had with the AMD, Robin Bradley and I had been friends for years. I used to buy advertising from him for the different, even back to Tucker Rocky days, and stuff like that. And he was running the, I think maybe the first one I did was an AMD show. He did a custom chrome. So he asked me to come over there and help with the judging and do that. And then I had a company, I had started a company called Biker Pros. That was where I would sell parts to builders, transmissions and some different parts to help the builders that they needed. I used to supply Sucker Punch, Sally. I did leathers too. I used to supply all the Easy Rider leathers from contacts I had built over the years. So it was kind of just a aftermarket company. And then it got into being more of doing these shows. So Robin hired us to actually manage the shows in Sturgis.
Yeah.
And bring in extra events, and we'd bring in some girls for photo booths or do stuff like that and help them run the whole deal. So that's how we actually got started, and it was through the AMD. And the IMS came to me one time, and they'd been trying to do their show, their Ultimate Builder thing. They tried a couple of times, and it was just a total flop. I mean, they had a 20 by 20 booths with somebody throwing things in. They had the Thug Show or something, and it was like the boosters and stuff, and it really wasn't done right. So it just caused a lot of arguments and stuff. So they asked me if I would do that, and I had been over in Europe, and Robin said, geez, we really need more exposure in the States rather than just at Sturgis and stuff like that. So AMD and IMS did not get along. From something before my time, they had some deal or show where they did together, and it just did not work. And
not to cut you off again with this, but just for my own ignorance, how long? And I mean, because you had IMS, which is International Motorcycle Show, that had a traveling schedule throughout the United States. You also had Easy Rider Show that had a traveling schedule throughout the United States. That seems to be another thing that I don't think we'll ever get to experience in motorcycling again.
No, and the Easy Rider shows, obviously, during Cincinnati, we used to run over to Columbus to the Easy Rider shows, and they paid big money too. They did the deal the right way. So Robin, I told Robin, I said, we can't do the Easy Rider show. They're their own thing.
Yeah.
They're going to run it the way they want to run it. You have a totally different mindset in how you want to run your shows and the way you do your judging and stuff like that. So that's not the way. I could go to IMS. He goes, no, we're not going to do IMS. You know, that's out of the question. I go, okay, it's up to you, but if you want to do this, we need somebody that has a show series already, or you're going to spend a lot more money getting this started, you know, and doing that. So he finally agreed. Then I come back to the States, and I explain that to them, and they go, oh, no. Same thing again. I said, listen, do you want this to work or not? What do you want to happen here? So I got them to actually work together for 2 years. And the winners of the show at the end of the series, we'd send over to Europe and stuff like that. And then at that point, we had enough going with the IMS shows. But I came up with this formula that just had, you know, just 4 classes that you could, well, you know the deal. So you could deal with it, and it had to be a show. You couldn't go by baggers or choppers because it's different in every region.
Yeah.
What the dominant style was. So we had to come up with the range that we did, and it worked. I mean, it was great, and we gave a lot of money out, and even when that got lowered a little bit because of the economy, it was a good system. Of course, we had the rest of the IMS show going on, and we did different things like that. And what we would do is we would have a party on Saturday night for the builders. That was totally on us, you know, and I paid for that out of pocket. But I said, this is what it's all about. It's a camaraderie, and people just we got offered a TV show one time, and they wanted to see a lot of arguing and stuff. I said, that's not who we are.
Yeah.
You know, I turned it down. I said, man, you know, that's not going to happen. These guys work together. Let me tell you the real thing what goes on. This guy, his bike fell. This guy over here took it, helped him fix the part and get it ready for the show to compete against them and stuff. I think that's a great story. Well, they didn't want that, you know.
Yeah.
But so that's how I got into the shows, and I did that. I backed out of the shows for a couple years. I can't even remember why right now, but I backed out for a couple years, and then they asked me to come back and do it again. And so I did. They liked the way I did things and stuff like that. So I came back and did that, and it just did that for 15 years, you know. And then we go over to Europe and do the World Championship over there, and it was a special time. I mean, I had a great time, you know.
So to kind of chime back into what you said about how Born Free and the inviter builder type of shows, like, you know, because that takes away the whole ride-in kind. Now everything's called a ride-in bike show. It's either an invited class of builders, or you rode your bike in, and there's not really a lot given to the ride-in guy other than a trophy. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so when I was younger, you know, and this kind of, I used to always want to go to the shows and support them because that's how I got people to want to do my job. You know, if they go to a show and his paint job's better than his, or his bike's cooler than his, then I'm the guy sitting here going, hey, I can help you with that.
Right.
So it helps create
exactly.
my industry. And so kind of to your point, and why I'm glad we're having this conversation, is that I think that, not that I have an answer, but maybe to start a conversation, with everything becoming so individualized through like your own, like you're self-promoting, there's no other promotions, there's no events to go to, there's no magazines to promote anybody, there's no collective to do anything, so everything's individual. Well, how do you ensure that the custom motorcycling stays alive, right? I mean, at some point, if there's no cool shows to go stumble in on, or these bikes aren't really customized other than a windshield and a set of handlebars pulling up everywhere, where's the stoke and what made Harley what it is, the individuality, how people have tricked these things out for the last 120 years. You know what I mean? Like, this shit could go away, in my opinion, you know?
See, it very much could. You know, one of the things that I believed in when I did the shows that made them successful is not only creating that camaraderie among the builders, but giving them opportunities to meet the OEs, to maybe do a job or meet manufacturers, parts manufacturers, introduce them to other people in the industry.
Yeah.
You know, that's the way I grew up. The first show I did at NEMPCO, What was that, 1982, I think. Again, I was so proud, that, hey, I'm from NEMPCO now and I'm doing this. And it wasn't, well, who's NEMPCO? What's that deal? So the next year, instead of business cards, I brought catalogs. I go, this is NEMPCO.
Yeah.
But I sat down with guys like Arlen Ness and Mel Magnet, and I listened to them. I didn't tell them what I knew or something. I said, I've always tried to listen. Even when I would take over a company or something, I try to find out first, how do you do stuff? And then if I got some better ideas, we could talk about it and incorporate that. And I mean, that's what was so great, having people like that be your mentor and to recognize the value of all the years they put in. We don't have that now. I've talked to people, and they all know, we know what we're doing. And that's, and the invitational shows have been successful, and I think they're going to continue. I went to Fandango for the first time last year, and they had a nice little show, but it's a really small group of people. And Harley's doesn't get it. With all this woke crap that's going on, man, and it's impermeated Harley Davidson to some degree. And
Yeah.
I mean, I used to know everybody at Harley.
Yeah.
I mean, I was good friends with Willie and his son Bill and stuff like that, and I knew the marketing people. I don't even know anybody over there now anymore.
Yeah.
But it's they're forgetting it. They're too focused on, like what you're saying, the responsibility to the board of directors and to the profitability and to the stockholders. Mm-hmm. And they're forgetting about what made it special and what this vehicle is supposed to be. The majority of people are never going to get on two wheels.
Yeah.
You got to recognize that. It's just too dangerous for them. And what makes motorcycles special is the ability to personalize them and making your own. I used to tell, I don't care if you put a grips and exhaust on. You say, hey, look at what I did.
Yeah.
This is my bike, and I did it. I
Yeah.
put these grips on and this exhaust myself, and you're really proud of it. You don't do that with a car.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a hot rod guy, that's a different thing, but that's another small group of people. That's what I'm afraid, like you said, that we're losing, and how to bring it back to a larger group of people is, I still don't have the answer for that.
Not to kind of be a little devil's advocate on it, I would say that I felt like 6 years ago, I felt Harley was the most out of touch they'd ever been with, this culture, right? But at the same time, I would say now, and this is just from my perspective, like with the things that they've done with Born Free, like they literally would give a bike to a brand or a builder who literally sells nothing but things that void warranties to build a bike and make these cool, and then take them to these events, which I never really saw that kind of stuff happen before in any other generation. I'm not saying never did, but
it's few and far between. They're much more, but that just to give a bike isn't going to solve the issue.
Yeah. This is another point I made, and maybe it'll kind of help. I guess maybe a perspective I see. 20 years ago in 2004, everybody that rode a bike, they wanted to be a custom bike builder. That was the coolest fucking thing to be in motorcycles. A master builder, a Jesse James, a Billy Lane, an Indian Larry, somebody that's in there fucking beating metal with a hammer and welding it up. The coolest fucking person at Sturgis was those guys, not Fabio on a getting paid to come hang out at a booth for an hour.
Right.
It was, oh shit, did you see Indian Larry go down the street? Now it's YouTubers, and it's different, right?
But some are cool and some aren't.
Well, that's the. I mean, in a sense, that's also the way it was back then. Some of the builders were dog shit, and it's just there's no regulating body to keep the riffraff out, right? But the thing is that the lot of the YouTubers that are more or less known really aren't building bikes. They're just kind of good at. They got great personalities. They make engaging content. Therefore, this stuff's out there. So the meat and potatoes, like when you watched, Motorcycle Mania, and almost half of the industry that exists now, this generation of builders, are products of those TV shows. They they built their first bike by doing the build a bike thing or the custom chrome. I forget which one it was, whether it was custom chrome or you could bike in a box and you build it.
Yeah, I actually started the bike in the
Yeah.
box thing from that first meeting I had with when I told you we sold the company and I did that presentation.
Yeah.
And it was just natural to me how to put a bike together.
Yeah. So 20 years ago, 25 years ago, a lot of people that I know and are big names in our industry now, they spent $3,000 or whatever the cost was on buying that opportunity to figure it out.
Right.
Well, nowadays they spend $3,000 on a camera, a laptop,
Yeah.
and a couple microphones, and they start a YouTube channel or they do all this. And so, better or worse, I don't know, but it's obviously different, right? And how does it how do you grow all? How does it lift all aspects of the industry? I think is the biggest question, because everything's individual based. Like the YouTuber doesn't need a customer; they just need a watcher,
Right.
right? The bike builder needed a customer, so you were constantly infecting other people with these, like this feeling of riding a bike and personalizing it. And the YouTuber, depending on whether they're based on inspiration or influence, like they're either going to try to sell you the next headset that's on the docket that they need to make $60 ad revenue from, or whatever's on the like it's pay to play kind of thing. There's not a lot of shit.
The YouTuber is the internet's version of the QVC catalog now, because it's just, oh, see, look at this headset. That's what I care about. Is look at this headset. Use my discount code so I can get my commission. And that's so there's no you're not having to lock anybody into motorcycles. It's just who can be a consumer.
So, and to kind of like carry us into this next conversation about what's going on legislative wise, I would say that I'm 42 years old, right? I have no fucking clue who, other than like I've known you for about 7 years now and a couple other people, I have no fucking clue who to talk to or find out about anything going on and what we're about to talk about.
Right.
About any of this behind the scenes stuff. Like I've ran pretty successful events or, small, but whatever.
Yeah, no.
And so you have like, I don't know how to, like, a lot of my generation doesn't know how to like take our ideas and put them into the next wave of things that maybe could make a Rot Rally better. It's not going to save Rot Rally, but it could bring that stuff into fruition. Most of us just get taken advantage of, you know what I mean? Because we're the influencer culture. We're the social media culture of bike builders, because that's kind of how people know about us, because the magazines, and especially the ones that still exist, they still go back and look at all the old heads to put them in the magazines, somehow every month. I love him to death, and I'm not talking shit, but Billy Lane gets a lot of airways still today, as opposed to like, who's new? Like, who's all these other guys going on? Like, where's the incentive to kind of like be the news and show what's going on all fronts of like this, so you can have the next Billy Lane and the next Jesse James and the next Indian Larry. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do, because first off, I got to say that I don't understand the YouTube thing and the influence thing at all, and I don't need to understand that anymore. So
it's a complicated.
It's that whole thing. If I was running Harley Davidson, what I would do right now is, I think the problem is they've distanced themselves from the core and from the builders. All they want to do is sell new bikes, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. What I would do is I would come back out. If you look at Ford and Chevy, they have crate engines. Yeah. The Coyotes, and the big engines and Mopar and stuff like that they sell to builders. And I don't care if they want to make the M8 or something, but make crate engines readily available.
Like from all models?
For just the engines themselves.
I mean, like twin cam shovel head.
Well, it's they have to pick one. It has to be profitable. I would do the twin cam myself. I mean, I love Evos, but you take the twin, and a lot of the builders now, they like the M8s because they can get 1 million horsepower out of them. Things, like that. But offer a crate engine. Yeah. And make it available that you can run into the Harley shop. and just buy a crate engine for a reasonable price. I mean, they had Evo engines available for $29.95.
Yeah.
For about $3,000 you could buy a crate engine from Harley Davidson, and you could buy a transmission. And then work on bikes that are older than 10 years old. Don't get rid of these bikes. Now maybe, so maybe back to Evos. Maybe not go back to shovel heads, or maybe just to shovel heads and not back before that. There is an industry for that, and that's a good place for the guys that on those older bikes, the guys that still build them and stuff like that. They're making some good money on that.
Yeah.
The guys that used to do customs, they're making money on rebuilding those old things. But have a builder program from Harley Davidson that you seek these guys, and you run these classes, and you do these things and offer these parts. I don't know, maybe they want to offer frames, but offer everything but a frame. And then somebody in the aftermarket has to come up with a frame. They have wheels and stuff, but it's for their bikes, for their whole thing. So involve the builders. That's the core. That's not gonna. It's going to be the future. Those guys that get in and build those bikes, that someday they're going to get older and they're going to buy a bagger.
Yeah.
The bagger thing, we started to talk about that before. I went to the bobbers and then I went to the baggers. It went to the baggers because the guy could have a custom bike that he could ride. He couldn't afford to have 2 or 3 bikes now, so he had one bike. He made it a custom and he rode it too.
Yeah.
So that's how that thing started. Then they got really crazy, with the big wheels and all this stuff. And that was cool. And you could say you were into baggers or not or whatever. It doesn't really matter, whatever your style is. But it created some excitement. It created people doing things. They just think they're going to sell new bikes. They wanted... Okay, so we'll get started on this other deal.
Yeah.
So OEs. So the big deal right now, we're talking about the independent motorcycle aftermarket.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, we had a podcast, I did with Cycle Source, and I was involved, and there were a lot of guys who were supposed to be out independent dealers and their struggle. So we're talking about all the stuff that's going on between the internet sales and this and that, and regulatory things going on that made it tough for them to be in business. State-wise, federal-wise, and all that. And one of the guys goes, boy, I wish it was like the old NEMPCO days, and everybody laughed. They go, do you know who's on this call? It was kind of cool. But after that, they said, would you help us start an independent dealer organization? I said, well, to start a new organization, we don't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
There's nobody around. You need an effective lobbyist in Washington, D.C. to present these things. Otherwise you're just talking. It's just bullshit if you don't have that.
Yeah.
I had dealt with the MRF in the past, and I talked with the MRF, explained to them what I wanted to do. I wanted to start a separate organization, but I needed to utilize their lobbyists, and I needed their lobbyists to pay attention to what my concerns were.
What's that organization, the MRF?
Motorcycle Riders Foundation.
Okay.
They're a SMRO, a state motorcycle rights organization. Well, they're national. They've been around for 40 years now, I think. And they have they deal with clubs, they deal with states, abates, and things like that. And they've fought profiling. In the early days, they fought helmet laws, and they have one of the top lobbyist companies in the country representing us in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So that was about a year and a half ago, So I have put together a website now, IMAmembers.org, that has, we have videos, we have reels, we have articles written. I'm writing articles now for American Bicycle Journal, which is their publication. And if you go there, you learn the type of things. If you join the IMA, or even the MRF for that matter, I mean, I'm more focused on the IMA, you get weekly legislative updates they send to you. And if it's a call to action, if it's something that's going to affect what we're doing in our lifestyle and our culture, they will actually tell you who your state representative is. All you got to do is click a button, push the thing, and send it through. And it goes, legislators don't care about us unless we focus on them and we support them. So you got to
build a voting.
Yeah, that's why this is so important, to be able to know what's going on. And we're never going to know. I'm not going to know. You're not going to go. They got somebody there all the time. When it's important, they let you know, and you push the button, and then you've made a vote to keep the motorcycle culture that we all love alive. There's the most recent one, and I put this on the IMAmembers.org, is a video from John Deere about right to repair. Mm-hmm. John Deere has now put together a deal where they sell tractors to farmers, and the issue is now everything is computerized and electronic. It's not mechanical. It's not like my grandfather or even me back. I mean, I still do hay some fields. I go out and work on my tractor. I diagnose it. I figure what's wrong. I get the part. I replace it. Well, everything is computerized now with sensors and stuff. John Deere has software to control these things, and they will not share that software with the farmers. So you got a problem on your new $60,000 tractor, you got to go to John Deere. Mm-hmm. So first thing is they're going to tell you, oh, well, it's going to be a couple weeks before we can get to it. Mm-hmm. They won't send you the software. You have to bring the thing. They won't come out in most cases. I'm sure there's some that will come out to you, some of the smaller places. But if you're a farmer, man, and your livelihood is and you're, at that time of year, and you need to do this, or, you need to do that, whatever, that doesn't help at all. Then the other thing is, it's going to cost you 10 times as much. On the old tractor, you get a solenoid, you replace the solenoid, it's $15. You spend a couple hours or an hour yourself, you do it, bam, you're back on the road plowing your fields. So the idea is that they control the consumer. They would like to see it at some point so that you don't even really own the tractor. You're spending $60,000 and
you're leasing it.
It's like you're leasing it.
It's a subscription.
Yeah.
It's the OnlyFans.
Yes. So right to repair is all about getting the information you need, getting the parts availability at a reasonable part, getting the tools that you need to work on it. And if they are not making the parts, being all right to have somebody in the aftermarket make the parts. Mm. And everybody is fighting for right to repair. You go look up right to repair on the internet, and you're going to see washing machines, tractors.
That was always a big thing with Apple.
Yeah, lawnmowers, Apple, and all that. And the deal is they want to control the consumers. So with Harley Davidson and motorcycles, getting back to our industry, what they would like to do is, the problem right now we're having the big deal is emissions. There are these small independent shops, a lot of them, 60% of their business is doing exhaust intake and tuning, maybe some cams and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, it becomes really difficult to tune the motorcycles. There's a lot of threats going out. Now, we're going to see some of that regulation go away with the new regime in next year. But with everybody wanting to be, they're concerned about their share of right to repair, motorcycle culture, motorcycle industry has to get in there and be in the front of the group. I mean, basically, we know we got 2 years to make something happen before the next election. We've been able to stop Harley Davidson from voiding warranties, because that's the other thing. If you do the work yourself, they're gonna void your warranty. It costs money to have these lobbyists go in and create these things, relationships, with all the different legislators and stuff like that. So at the IMA, and I gotta say, the MRF and the lobbyists have been tremendous. Mm-hmm. They're really focused. It appears that their whole focus has changed on what we need as independent dealers and motorcycles. They're still concerned about some of the profiling issues and some of the things that clubs have to deal with and stuff. But right now, I actually got to help construct part of the right to repair legislation. Like they didn't have the deal about the replacement parts in there and stuff. And it's been an uphill battle to try to get people to join for two reasons. One, I talk to a lot of dealers, and they'll go, and the other threat is just taking away internal combustion. Yeah. So again, we're going to see some relief on that, I think, with this new regime. But up until this last election, I mean, we were really concerned. There's 16 states now that follow CARB, California Air Resources Board. And I talk to guys. I've gone around, talked to people at Sturgis and Daytona. I've gone and visited dealers and trying to explain this. And they go, that's never going to happen. They're not going to take away internal combustion. And the emissions and the EPA shouldn't even be enforcing laws. And they've been threatening. Companies have had to close down that provided tuners because they were threatened with $1 million fines and stuff. This is real. This is happening.
Yeah.
And in California right now, you cannot buy parts to improve your performance. Yeah.
I mean,
you can't buy cams, you can't buy exhaust, you can't buy anything
tuners,
like that.
Yeah.
I don't know that Drag Specialty has actually enforced it yet, but they've had a request, or they have a setup that if you sell any of the non-compliant stuff, you have to sign a waiver that it goes to somebody that is competition only. And then they have to tell you, and they supposedly bring it in on a trailer with no plates in it, and da-da-da. And that ain't going to happen. All they're doing is trying to shift the liability.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem. Drag's just trying to cover it. They're trying to survive,
Yeah,
too.
that's what I heard. I heard the government was talking about enforcing it on the distributor, like it's their responsibility.
And so what the distributor is doing is forcing it on the dealers.
Yeah.
What the dealers is doing is forcing. But you're absolutely right. That's what's going on right now. Now, we hope to see some changes. To join the IMA, it's $100, which is the other thing. Years ago, this is not new for me. I mean, the aftermarket has been my life. We went, as a group, we went to SEMA. We went to the motorcycle industry with these same concerns years ago because we saw this coming.
Yeah.
And SEMA just wanted the money. They got more things going on, and they're more focused on the cars and all that stuff. And they're a decent organization. I don't have a problem with them. MIC is funded by the OEs, so you got to realize the OEs are going to what they prefer is the John Deere model. They don't want you to have any performance options unless you buy. And they have packages now. I don't know if you know, Harley is offering performance packages that are approved. So to get a package approved, it's about $40,000 to go to a lab and have it all tested in this particular configuration to get it approved.
Yeah. Is that why, like, if you buy like a 131 crate motor, there's all these stipulations of things you got to buy with it?
Yes.
So instead of just buying the motor, you got to buy
that package,
exhaust, all these other things.
Because that package is approved.
Okay.
So that's what makes that so it passes the EPA emissions. We can go on. You know, there's all kinds of things about.
Well, and so for people to understand, like that $100 is that's the money that's needed to help fund the lobbyists and things like that to make things happen.
Yeah, in Washington, you pay to play.
Yeah.
That's just the name of the game.
Yeah. That's the reality of the deal.
That's 2 Dixon flannels for some of you nerds.
Yeah, and the other deal is that we need numbers.
Yeah.
I need to be able to say there's 2,000 independent guys here that are very concerned about this.
Yeah.
Then they pay attention. If you're a congressperson or a senator, you're not going to pay attention if there's 100 people.
Yeah,
which is about where we sit right now. We got about 100 people in the deal like that.
Mm-hmm.
So Harley would like to sell you a new bike every 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there is talk, and you know, we have to be really careful. I'm hopeful. I'm a wicked conservative, and I'm hopeful that we got the next 12 years where we're going to move ahead and get away from this heavy regulation on everything. And it certainly looks like we're going to move in the right direction.
Well, I was going to say, with Musk coming in and this program, I mean, there's got to be some hope that obviously not completely getting rid of all regulations. I mean, kind of be dope, but realistically, it's not going to happen. But if they ease up on some of this stuff, because what's a motorcycle exhaust really doing to? I mean, if anything, if you, and I've always said this, and let me just jump into my spiel real quick.
Go ahead. That's.
So you live in Texas, right?
Yeah.
I live in Texas. When you go to California, it's traffic everywhere. And you know what's really nice? Lane splitting.
Yeah.
You know what that helps do? When you live in a state like Texas where you can technically ride all year, that becomes a viable option for commuting. Therefore, alleviating some traffic, because now you have maybe a percentage of the people on the highway commuting to and from work are now on motorcycles or scooters or something, right? Because now there's an incentive to go and be able to bypass some of this stuff, right? You have less parking issues. You have less space being taken up in downtown areas. And the byproduct is this: now you have more people riding. Now you have more repairs need to be done. Now you have more independent shops. You have more of everything happening. It boosts the economy, in my opinion. Just very ignorant one, but if I was just a, apple to apple, orange to orange kind of
and less
situation.
emissions than everyone if they're in their big, huge truck.
So my question is, or my thing is, like, how do you I wear a helmet all the time normally, but if I had to trade like Texas no helmet law for a helmet law to get lane splitting, I'm sorry, I'm taking lane splitting. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, and it's not the deal it used to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I wear a helmet now. I wear one of those little beanie helmets. I don't wear, I rode thousands of miles with no helmet.
Yeah.
Faster than I really should have.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's fucked up to say, but hey, we keep hospitals in business too, though.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's like, it's a choice.
But so there's some other values there too. But here's the deal. First, the whole emissions thing is bullshit.
Yes.
The CO2 is necessary for this Earth to survive. It makes for a greener world. They talk about this warming, the global warming going on right now. Well, if you look at the past, whatever it is, 100 or a couple hundred years that they've actually been recording that, yeah, it's warmed up a little bit. But if you look at proxy data and go back to earlier days, we're nowhere near what any kind of heat is going to cause a problem.
Yeah.
In fact, we're more concerned about lowering temperatures and cooling things. So that's a real basic thing that you're probably not going to get a lot of people ever to understand. Motorcycles, what more than the emissions is what comes off of tires. The particles. They talk about the particles. And you look at electric vehicles, they're so heavy with those batteries that they have. They
go through tires faster.
I was in a discount tire store, picking up something, and this guy had a Tesla, and he had 40,000-mile tires. They had about 20,000 miles on them, and the guy said, "Well, we can't do anything about it because you got an electric vehicle."
Yeah.
You're lucky to get 50% of the wear, so you're throwing more particles off.
Yeah.
You can go back. Some of the new emissions things that they have, some of these small cars can actually compete with the emissions on a motorcycle, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But everything else you were talking about, the space, what it takes up, and
carbon footprint.
And there's just not that many motorcycles. It's really going to make any difference. Now, what would be really nice is if we could just make motorcycles exempt from all this emission stuff.
It would make sense, just the same way classic cars are and things like that.
Yeah, and there is some people that are working on that, and we would probably get support from the OEs and the organizations on that because it's going to help motorcycles.
Well, when they meant like newer motors and everything, it's more efficient, right?
Absolutely.
And because of that efficiency, it puts out, I would imagine it's cleaner.
If we could tune bikes, I know guys that are really down to this and they understand the science much better than me. You can make it more efficient than a bike coming out of the factory.
Yeah.
If they share the standards, which they don't really do, you can find them out ways, but they don't make it easy.
Yeah.
But you can make things more efficient with proper tuning. Mm-hmm. There's ways that you can beat this deal, but we got to get the laws changed. We got to get this realized that what the OEs are not going to support, I don't believe, is the right to repair that we're looking for. I looked on the MIC to see they had their right to repair, and they didn't even discuss the issues like the free flow of information, the tool availability, the making the parts, and the voiding of warranties.
Yeah.
They're not going to support that. That's why it's so important to support the IMA if you're an independent dealer. Now, what else does this affect? This affects our culture. If we can't build bikes, well, you're talking, okay, so you got a shovelhead that's pre-compliant, so they're not going to say anything about that. But if you can't build up your M8 the way you want with 150 horsepower, and you got to wait and spend $50,000 to buy it from Harley or buy their package, you're not going to necessarily get the power you want for. Maybe some guy wants it for touring, some guy wants it for better mileage, some guy wants it for racing. We got to have that freedom, and it gets right back to what you were talking about what makes custom builders so unique is that the ability to personalize and build their own thing. That's our culture, and that's what's dropping away. When you got car conglomerates owning Harley dealerships, they don't care about that.
Yeah.
They're running the dealerships the same way they run a car dealership. They'll have a few events. They'll have an open house. They'll sell you a bike. They'll load up everything on financing when you do it, and that's all they care about. They would really rather not even do service when you talk to these guys and stuff. So that's what we're fighting. That's the danger right now. And so now I'm a little bit concerned because this new regime is coming in, and people are going to say, "Oh, well, that's going to all be taken care of." It's not if we don't.
If you let your foot off the gas,
if we don't raise our hand and say, "Hey, don't forget us." Remember, there's not a whole lot of us.
Yeah, that's what the lobbyist does. The lobbyist basically works on our behalf to say, "Hey, remember how you got elected? It's on these guys.
Yeah.
So don't forget them."
Yeah. And we have some, and it's really not even a partisan issue, is what a lot of people don't understand, because we do have Democrats that support us that are motorcyclists.
Yeah.
Our Speaker of the House right now out of Louisiana has long supported motorcycles and motorcycle rights. Mm-hmm. So we have some powerful people, but we got to remind them what's going on. We have a thing in May where all the bikers ride on Washington, D.C., and we go visit all the legislators and have discussions with them and stuff like that. And that's a big deal. We're trying to get more people going for that ride. I think I'm going to try to do that ride in May this year. There's a lot going on, and to say that it's not going to happen, or
I'm listening to you tell me all this stuff, and I'm thinking, and you had said some things earlier that I see the difference between, not difference in any kind of bad way, but just recognizing the difference between, I think, your generation of being a part of this motorcycle industry and almost essentially you and your constituents. I think that word's the right word.
Yeah, that works.
Just your peers built this industry that now at some point we'll inherit, right? But I feel like my generation is really in the dark, and we're not in the dark because you guys aren't putting the information out. I think we're in the dark because I think we're just like playing, like I don't know. Like, I feel like we're just somewhere else doing, like, trying to get, like, survive, or I don't know what it is.
Ignorance is bliss. We just take it for granted because it was there for us.
I get to talk to almost everybody that's a part of this industry, and these kind of conversations rarely come up. And when you talk about anything like, legislative or, lobbyists to come in and stuff, it's not on anybody's radar. And I feel like my generation's, and the people in the industry,
I mean, back in the 80s, I did a deposition in the state capitol of Massachusetts for anti-helmet laws and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so this has been we've fought for these rights. We've been fighting for the right to be a biker our whole lives.
I think that my generation might just be more so like we don't fight back. Does that make sense?
Well, that's what I mean by the ignorance is bliss. We've take for granted that it's there, so we just assume it's always going to be there.
Well, we didn't know that was an option.
Yeah. We can't even. Our generation can't fathom, and the generation below us, they can't even fathom it not being there. Just like, oh, what are you talking about?
I guess it's how we do it now. We're just
anywhere.
like adaptable. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, I don't know if that's because of participation awards rather than meritorious awards.
that might be the generation before mine. I'm an elder millennial, so
All right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the generation just past us that grew up in the participation trophy, and that's we just get what we. Yeah, no, we get it. We're getting it. No, I don't know what you're talking about. This will never go away. When
I think that, like, my generation, like I said, I was born in '82, so we have a lot of values that are from Gen X, the 60s, 70s babies, and we understand the culture of I guess the Generation Y, I think is the next one.
I think millennials.
I'm millennial, so 82 to 95 is millennial. The next one, whatever. So, like I said, we got to live in a world that was similar to the 70s, and we got to live some of our
The life of the internet, the birth of the internet.
Yeah, the life of the internet.
So it's like we have kind of a balance of understanding both, but we live in a current era. And when I flip through my old Easy Riders and I see these ads for, like, we're going to the state to fight exactly what you're talking about, because I collect all these old magazines and flip through them from time to time. and you see these type of things. I'm like, man, that's not a topic of conversation amongst like this world right now. I think we're so consumer based, like whether it's the YouTube people that it's out there or the or just the brands themselves, everybody's trying to sell something and everybody's trying to market something. You know what I mean? It's all that's kind of the place we're at now. It's like people watch YouTube videos because we were talking about this the other day. It's a search engine because people want to find information about the product they want to buy, and not so much the product they want to learn how to make. Right? Learning how to make the product has like 500 views. The product for sale, 5 million views.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes. I do. I get
so
that.
There's like a lot of people that don't want to learn how to fish. Right? And so one thing that I remember my good friend, like the third podcast we ever did in 2018, he said something to me, and I've said it a million times. He goes, I don't want anything to die on my watch. So I want to be here to help carry on the legacy of men like yourself, Ness and Perowitz and all this. I want to help carry that message into like generations past, even mine, but also find a way to leave my own mark on it. You know what I mean? A little ego there, but you know.
No, but there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I'm proud of what I've done. You know,
Yeah.
And you know, I have a big ego as anybody. You know, I mean, I listen to other people and I try to help people and give them credit, but you know, I got nothing wrong with getting an attaboy and stuff like that. You know, it works for me too.
Yeah.
I'm a little miffed, and it goes back to what we talked about with Rot, of this. How do we bridge this gap between the generations? We have this MRF and IMA puts on a meeting every year called the Meeting of the Minds. Next year, in fact, you should probably come and do some stuff because next year it's going to be in Shreveport.
Okay, yeah.
So it's going to be real close.
Dude, if I'm in the know, I'll make time to do shit like that.
It'll blow your mind.
Yeah.
We have about 400 people that show up from around the country, and they're all active motorcycle rights people. The problem is they're all my age.
Yeah.
We had one girl show up this year that's working for one state that's 22, and we gave her all kinds of awards and everything. I mean, we just Tara from Main Street Moto in Vegas got caught up, and she's like your age, I think, and you know, she found out what we're doing, and she's actively trying to help right now. And she got up and helped. We did a panel. I did a presentation for the IMA deal, and we had it was an hour presentation. I talked for about 40 minutes, kind of filled everybody in like on different stuff that we're talking about tonight, and then had questions go on for about a half an hour. And we just had to move on because there was other things going on. So there's a lot of interest, but we don't have enough young people. I challenge people. I said, pay for somebody to come. Bring somebody younger with you, you know, and have them come. Share the room, whatever the deal is, you know, you got to do like that. But I brought a few of the industry people this year, kind of came, and even that's kind of different because this is like the real culture. I mean, you go and you're going to see all these gray beard, long hair guys, and you know, some and women and stuff like that are hardcore, and even our industry doesn't really even pay attention to all that, you know. And my deal is, you know, I just know that the OEM organizations that everybody thinks is going to save us are not. They're just because what I explained about John Deere and everything. That's not what. It's not to their benefit. It's not. It's not. It doesn't make sense to their board of directors. It doesn't make sense to their profitability or their stockholders. It's if they can control the consumer, and then once they do that, we're done. Our whole beauty is that we don't want to be controlled.
Yeah, I mean that's the purpose of the mics.
I think that, you know, we get back. I think that was my whole attraction to the industry. You know, you got to stand free and speak up and say your mind, and you got smacked in the head once in a while, but you still got to say your piece and you know, and enjoy things, and that personality of whether it's full customization or just bolting a couple things on. It's a motorcycle is personal, and that gets to our lifestyle, our livelihood, right? We're talking how you make money.
Yeah.
And you know, if we could get some of these influencers and YouTubers to buy into this and just, they don't have to sell anything. They can sell their whatever, hair dryers or whatever they want to sell. But get people involved and do this. Boy, it would be huge, but we got that gap.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's not just age. It's within our industry. And I guess it's a bit of a problem that we've always had. Mm-hmm. You know, when I grew up, it was Harley and Jap bikes, and two didn't meet. You know, I was kind of an anomaly because of the way I grew up in the thing, being a Harley family, getting into the industry, and then getting back to the Harleys. We used to go to Laconia. We had this one guy that was a real good friend and stuff, but he rode a Kawasaki. We made him ride in the back, you know, if you're going to go with us, you know, and don't leave when we leave. Wait till we leave, then you can kind of catch up to us, you know. And he was cool with it, too, because he got to hang with us and party and stuff, you know. I mean, so there's always been some kind of separation.
Well, there was I was going to get to this. I was finding the right way to bring it back into the conversation, but because there was that camaraderie and the stigma of motorcycles that basically was slowly dissipating as you get out of the 70s into the 80s and becoming the 90s. And now most of the people that are currently active and riding are so far removed from any of that kind of notion that even ever existed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That like, you know, we get people say things like gatekeepers are an issue. And I was like, dude, we don't have enough gatekeepers. Yeah. People should have to try a little harder to be a part of this world, you know, because if it's easy, you won't appreciate it. If it's easy to get in and be at the center of everything that goes on, you'll never appreciate it. It's just like the beautiful girl that gives it up on the first night. Like, I don't know, man. Like that's shouldn't have been a little harder.
Yeah, right.
You know,
right.
like, so, you know, not saying that there needs to be like hazing and whatever. I'm just saying like, you gotta, there needs to be a little more protection of this in a way, but also open-mindedness to things. It's a Confucius conversation to have, but there's something happening now where it's easy to be a part of it. So it's people come and go. There's no, I feel like I don't meet as many people who are saying, I will never not do this. It's like a thing. It's a phase for a lot of people now.
Yeah, you know? I mean, God, that's, you know, that's totally the opposite for me, obviously, you know. Yeah. And just about everybody I know. I mean, I've had good friends throughout this deal that, you know, their family. LaPera's got inducted into the Hall of Fame last year, and they asked me to introduce them because I was good friends with their father. Yeah. You know, that's family. Yeah. And getting up there, and we got up there and did that, and there was, I don't remember how many people, there was 400, 500 people at that Hall of Fame breakfast, and everybody felt that. Yeah. You know, because that was a generation to generation type of thing. And just like I said, I don't know about YouTube. I don't know, you know, the podcast. I got to learn how to find a podcast now so I can watch this thing. And, you know, and I will. And you know, and I look through the internet and I do some reels on Instagram. That's a big deal to me. My wife takes the phone and I talk for a minute, and, you know, we post it on Instagram, and that's about the most, you know, effective thing I do. I mean, but we don't know. My generation does not know how to attract younger people in. And what I just realized this evening that I didn't realize before is that you guys aren't aware of what we had to do to be here today, you know, and to value this culture. You know, this culture of riding around and doing camp outs. I mean, I spent many a night sleeping on the side of the road, you know, and just and just riding back and forth across the country and fixing bikes. And when you know, you got to remember, I was part of this deal when electronic ignitions first came out, and it used to be the Motorola deal, and they were crap. And I used to carry a points plate assembly around me all the time. When that ignition failed, I'd give somebody a points plate so they could get home that night, you know. And now, I mean, it's just, you know, the whole deal. And I have no idea. I mean, I got a couple twin cams, but most of my stuff is shovel heads and Evos. I've been doing the Evo stuff lately. Yeah. So I have no idea how this electronic tuning stuff goes and all that. But I know people that know. Yeah. And I know people that can do it. And I see the danger of those people that are taken away from them. You know, I'm still, like kind of a silent partner in a shop up in Arkansas. I'm not actively involved in the shop anymore, but I have an investment in it. And, you know, it's just, we had to, what we had to do, because it was so tough to just make that payroll all the time, is we got 11 acres. We bought 10 Airstream trailers, and we're doing Airbnb in back of the shop. You know, just to have something, so we'll have enough cash flow to keep everything going. Yeah. And we're going to do a little museum. I'm going to put my old bikes up there so I have more room in the garage. Yeah. But, you know, it's that kind of commitment. You know, my partner and his son moved up to Arkansas, and they said, we'd like to move the shop up there. And I said, well, whatever I get out of this, you know, I'll reinvest it. I ended up putting in a little bit more, too. You know, that's usually the way. But because it's so important. You know, we're going to have, it's going to be kind of like an aftermarket museum. We're going to put a lot of history, because most of my stuff has been evolved around the aftermarket. Yeah. And to me, that's the most important thing. Yeah, you need Harley Davidson, you need Honda to come up with the basic thing. But, I mean, other than the power plants, Harley has never done anything innovative in their entire history, other than when they first came. The Super Glide came from drag racing. A lot of the bagger thing. You know, and the expansion of that came out of the market. Pro Street came from drag racing. Yeah. Diggers, you know, the bobbers, all that came out of the culture.
Yeah, the way people, you know, they customize them and make them theirs. You know. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. It's a symbiotic relationship that you kind of need one to help inspire and usher what the people want to the, you know what I mean, to that. So, yeah. Yeah, it like I said, it's just a conversation that, you know, I about year. I mean, doing podcasts and being able to sit here and have conversations with certain guys and individuals that's been a part of this for a while. You hear stories, and then I got this. I've always loved magazines. Then you get this urge to want to buy these old magazines and buy these old books. You know, I got a Flash Productions book over here, a really cool book on portraits of American bikers that most people that are currently buying a Thrash and Supply, you know, set of T-bars for their bike, they're so fixated on the now that they don't care about anything prior to right now. And I think because of my love for motorcycles, and I'm not talking shit about Thrash, I'm just first brand that came to mind. I love this so much, and it's provided me a lifestyle, not rich, not poor, but it's awarded me the ability to live a pretty awesome life on two wheels, right? So I want to know more about it, and I want to carry this history, and I want to try to avoid some shit, and I want to see these things coming and realize that the same way the bikes trends change, I think the trend of business and how it's been done forever is in a same trend of change right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Conversations need to be had on how to save certain aspects of culture, because business doesn't give a fuck about culture. You know?
No, not at all. You're absolutely correct.
And the way that our business side of the industry is going now is a byproduct of destroying the culture.
Yes.
Not on purpose. Nobody's like,
well said. But that's the result. Yes. That will be the result.
Yeah. And so that's kind of, I see that coming, and I mean, I could, if I had a minute, I could write it all down and show things that I think are really fucking things up. But just, you know, glossing over the statement here, you know, trade shows are gone, indoor shows are gone, motorcycle shows are reduced to basically riding bike shows with, like, you know, derby cover engravings on it, you know, a gift card from, you know, said brand. You know, it's not even really something you're proud to hang up on the wall because, you know, I mean, what was the criteria to win? Did you just have a lot of friends there? You know, like, so there, like, there's a lot of things that, you know, how do you get, you know, how, like, Born Free can't be the only thing that's got like a path to go have a bike at Yokohama. There should be other things in all the different genres of bikes that people are putting something in on the table so that builders of all these different styles can go somewhere with it.
Well, and it should be, you know, to me, I don't know why there isn't like small shows that send somebody to Born Free.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's the basic thing we used to do. We had 12 shows around the country, and we would send at the end we'd have a championship and send the winner to Germany.
Yeah.
That used to be the AMD show, and it was in Sturgis for years. And again, the economy killed that.
Yeah.
Because then they couldn't afford to send the bikes. We used to be able to air freight a bike from Europe to Sturgis for $7,000.
Damn.
Now to ship a bike by boat is probably about $14,000.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I remember, I did a podcast with Yaffe long time ago, and he talked about how, in the early 2000s, you had a lot of the cigarette companies investing money into the event. So you're getting these, these events had more money to throw around. And then, of course, there was something that happened. I don't remember the exact things, but there was some kind of advertisement thing that they couldn't do anymore, and it kind of forced them out of like certain parts of the industry. And a lot of the beer companies also left, like the motorcycle rallies.
Yeah, I think it was you couldn't have personalities. That's why they had that Camel deal with the cigarettes and stuff.
And the Marlboro Man and all that stuff is gone. So that fucks up like a lot of the income that was coming from outside of our own economy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? And then, not that I'm complaining or trying to talk shit about it, but just saying now all we really have is the insurance companies because they have a vested interest to make their presence known at these events. But, Progressive and Geico and State Farm can't fund, a $40,000 bike show at fucking Full Throttle and another one at Buffalo Chip, and then the one at the Cabbage Patch in Daytona, and said, you know what I mean? Like it's not enough to be spread.
Well, and it's all different.
Yeah.
There's nothing bringing them together. There's no network.
Yeah.
I don't know how to create it. And the history, it's a shame to lose the history. You talk about Paul Yaffe. He was sued a couple years ago because of a bend on his handlebars. So I got to be a expert witness. And I said, man, I've seen that bend 20 years ago, man. This ain't new, and they won the case, But having that history, just things like that, that there is nothing new. There really isn't. I mean, other than the new configuration of the power plant. But a wheel's a wheel, frame's a frame.
The things that generally I think create the most value for individuals when they go do things on their bikes is tried and true 100-year-old ideas.
Yeah.
Racing, camping, riding across country, the things that give people the least amount of, when you're building this bike in your garage and you're spending months in that process, you're going to daydream about riding this thing somewhere, doing something on it, right? It's depicted very vividly in David Mann paintings. That's why they're on the wall down there.
Yeah.
And when people come to the shop, even people that are like, oh, I'm not into those kind of bikes. I'm like, but are you into bike shit? Because that's about bikes. That's about the life of motorcycling.
Yes, the culture.
You're looking at the bike. You're so looking at the surface of things and not realizing that everything you do now is depicted 40 fucking years ago on these type of bikes. So don't think that you're different, homie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah,
the thing is really the culture. I mean, that's what scares me. All this stuff. If this is what I got to do to save the culture, that's why I'm doing it. And it's all volunteer. I mean, I fly to Vegas to do a presentation. That's my dime.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a rich guy, but I'm very comfortable. I got a bunch of motorcycles. I got a couple hot rods and stuff like that. So I'm very privileged, like you were saying, to be in that position. But to me, I have a grandson, everybody knows because I always talk about him. I got him a Stasic. I built a track out back of the barn. I got a CL70, and him and I race around the track. I lace up a wheel. He's over there putting the spokes in while I'm getting everything. I try to tell people that's how you pass it on.
Yeah.
I over the years, I mean, I've had luck with getting great deals on projects and stuff. Well, I have 3 nephews that are into bikes, so I gave them each a custom bike project because I was never going to get to it.
Yeah.
Well,
what do you
got to do that?
What do you think? I mean, I think personally, but I'm asking you, things like the Bike Riders movie or when Sons of Anarchy was on TV, like these kind of cultural TV show things, I think do well to help maybe inspire people that never look like a window inside, even if it's a fictitious world. like it's a bike and you're seeing a bike on TV or on, you know, a movie screen or things like that. And if you think about all that, you know, looking back, not the most amazing movies ever made, but you go look at the Wild Ones and Easy Rider and, you know, Harley Davidson, Marble Man, like these movies, time capsules. But if you're a biker, you watch them, you're like, fuck yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I still enjoy that.
Yeah.
You know?
And so
absolutely
finding a way to, how do you keep motorcycling in that space? You know what I'm saying? I think, I think that helps create stoke for generations below us. You know what I mean?
I keep saying it. I think it's how do we promote the culture?
Yeah.
Because if you understand the culture or appreciate the culture, then that's going to motivate you to learn more about it.
Yeah.
You can't force people on it. And like you said, it doesn't matter what type of bike. And I've said that for years. I've years and years. I've just said, like I said before, there's a majority of people are never going to get on two wheels, and thank God for that.
Yeah,
I think that's great because I don't want everybody and their brother and mother and father riding a motorcycle.
Yeah,
I want the guys that appreciate it, and that's the value of the culture.
Yeah,
and that whole deal, and pulling over on the side of the road. You're running down the road with an empty truck or a trailer, and you see somebody that's pulled over. You pull right over.
Yeah.
Hey, what do you need, man? That's the culture. That's what nobody else has.
Yeah.
That's what we have.
The road provides.
Yeah.
The road is the culture.
Yeah. Well, it is. The best stories come from the road.
Yeah.
I don't ride the bike up to Sturgis anymore, but every year I rode to Sturgis and back looking for a different route to take. And some years, somebody broke. I only like to ride with a couple guys. I don't like to ride with a big group, but there's a problem. The best stories come from a breakdown on the road and walking into a Tractor Supply and saying, "Hey, anybody got a welding job we can use?
Yeah.
We got to fix this pipe bracket or something." And that's that's legit, man. It's the best stories in the world.
Well, when you take the initiative and learn how to build something like that, and then you do have those problems, those are like little wins that you have on the trip. Like, oh, well, I'm concerned about my exhaust bracket that I fabricated, but when something that you had no concern about that you built breaks, you're like, God damn, that one really threw me for a loop. And you learn, and every bike gets builder.
I thought I had that. Yeah. And then when you run, a couple of years ago, my nephew and I did a run with the hamsters in Colorado. We did 2,000 miles in 5 days.
Yeah.
Run all the mountains from one end of Colorado to the other on two bikes that I had just put together.
Yeah.
And we had one bolt loosen up and one little bracket break.
Yeah.
And I was like, man.
Getting kind of good at this, huh?
Hey, this is working out. May not be the fanciest deal, but you can ride the sucker,
Well, that's why, like, also, on that topic, what I was talking about, like movies and TV shows, the kind of people in that world that are going to make things like that about motorcycling, when you look at Easy Rider, it was and even kind of like Harley Davidson Marble Man, it wasn't about a gang or a club. It was like, I would love to see a modern rendition of Easy Rider. Like, what does that look like today? Maybe it's, some of the period correct chopper dudes doing it or whatever, but what does that look like? How's that story? If you parallel those two stories, how much has really changed? You know what I'm saying? Fixing on the side of the road, letting the wind kind of blow you in different directions and find you in these like unique spots. It's a wanderlust kind of thing to love motorcycles and traveling on them,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But, I don't know. Like, I guess what I was trying to make the point about is, the biker gang is the crime TV show that most people are interested in, so that's where the views come from. But it doesn't.
The conflicts. They back to the Tuttles.
Yeah. I've always said if they would have redo Wild Hogs with more of a drama, maybe a little dry humor to it, but like a serious movie, I think it'd be fucking good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
People lost in their life and they jump on a bike and they find themselves through like connecting with friends they haven't talked to in a while and get out on the road and have adventures. Like, why has it got to be a joke? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is fucking real.
Yeah. No, that whole thing was a joke. And it's just, it's really interesting about the club thing because obviously, when I was in the business and started and stuff, that was a major part of the business.
Yeah, that was a big customer base of the business.
Yeah, right, right, exactly.
Yeah.
It was a huge customer base, and I'd talk with guys like Kendall Johnson, and stuff like that, and we get together, and it's man, we used to do this and that, and it was a very serious way of doing business, you know, but but they had a bigger presence, I think, then, and the club guys, they're serious about what they do and they live their lifestyle and stuff like that. But they're maintaining their part of the culture. They've actually maintained the culture, and I don't know what they do outside, but what I meet the guys, they're more open. They're riding. They're doing the stuff we're talking about. They get on their motorcycles and ride. They still get a bad treatment, in different places and stuff like that. And they just don't seem to be. There's a lot more people riding bikes now than there used to be. I mean, you can't deny that there is, but there's something. It's this culture thing, and I don't know. I don't know how to save it. I don't know how to make people understand the importance of it. It's back to like my father had gotten me this thing that said cowboys, truckers, and bikers, and that whole thing and how important. And that was strictly culture. Mm-hmm. And we got to realize that. And all that is a threat now. I mean, Chrysler time, if you're a truck driver now, what are you going to do? Drive 8 hours a day?
Yeah.
No more driving through the night or whatever the deal is. The world is changing. I don't even have a problem with electric vehicles and electric motorcycles. The world's going to change. What I do have a problem is when they tell you have to buy an electric vehicle or you can't buy an internal combustion engine. Mm-hmm. In one of my presentations, I said, listen, in the 1900s, when internal combustion first came about and there was motorcycles and cars and stuff like that, they didn't go and kill all the horses to make you ride internal combustion.
Free market. Let the market decide what's going to be successful.
Yeah.
And if electric motorcycles is what the market determines is good, then that's fine. Then the business can go where the demand is.
That's a good point.
But you can't force it by legislation that says, "Oh, we're going to say you have to do this,"
right?
Or we're going to incentivize this so that the manufacturer does that.
Yeah, they're making small adjustments to the way they operate that make us accustomed to this change, this inevitable change, like taking away the ability to work on your own shit, making it more complicated, whatever. It's like slowly nudging everything into this direction. It's like it's slowly taking away the freedom of it, but you don't notice it because it's a little thing here and there. And most people are not working on their own bikes. They're taking it to a dealership or whatever the case may be. So they read the headline. Nope, that's not my problem. I don't deal with that shit. They don't see if the headline was, you could lose your Vance and Hines is going away, Or,
well, I mean, if you want to get into the deep dive on it, then you run into, okay, so who's the investor in Harley Davidson? Some of the biggest ones are, Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. So guess what? They also own the same companies that produce the solar panels and the lithium batteries. So guess what? So now, and they're the ones that have the big they are the big capital investment firms that these government agencies, that all of their retirements are in. So what they do is then they're really dictating what they have, the huge money lobbyists. They push these initiatives. And then what they can do is they can force feed it through Harley and say, if you want us to continue to invest, we can bankrupt your company because we'll just flood the market with your shares. It will tank your company. So guess what? You're going to bend the knee to us because we are the ones that own you.
Yeah.
And they force feed this down there. And that's where you're saying, and I'm right there with you. Let the market decide where we go. Don't make, because it's this, we're in this investment time frame where government and the sole investors, which really is not even their money, it's government money, and it's money that's they're just in control of, that's dictating all these changes behind the scenes. And that's where all the DEI stuff comes from too. It's the same thing.
When I grew up and got in business, our goal was to discover what the consumer wanted, satisfy the consumer, learn what the consumer's needs were, take care of those. It seems now what the goal is to homogenize society and control it. It's easier than trying to figure out all these different aspects, why these people do things. Well, we can't figure that out, so let's just control it and make it the way we want. And, we'll give them motorcycles, but they got to be electric, and they got to do this, and they're going to have, gyro things so they don't fall over. In Europe right now, there's actually legislation, I don't know if it's actually been submitted yet, but end-of-life stuff. So there is no criteria, but there's a lot of discussion about end-of-life of motorcycles, so that either by mileage or by age, there's even talk of, at that point, taking it so you can't ride them on the road, and at some point maybe even having to destroy them.
Isn't that how they do it in Japan?
I'm not aware of that.
Japan had something like that on their cars. That's how our import scene got flooded with Japanese.
They have a shelf life. I think it's 20 years or 25 years, something. They have to basically.
But that's a discussion with motorcycles right now.
Yeah.
So the guy that comes to Bike Night that was in Italy, he said over there you cannot modify your bike legally.
Oh yeah.
It has to be completely the way it comes from the factory is the only way you can have it.
No, what guys would do, and I don't know if it's still over there. I mean, I haven't been over there in a few years, but they would make changes to their bike. Then when they go register, they put the stock stuff back on, do it, get inspected, then come back and change it.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
We don't need that here. We don't need that here.
Yeah, you can't be the place of freedom and democracy, and you're not free to, paint your bike how you want, or run a certain motor. Like, it's just weird. You know what I mean?
I mean it's down to customization. Will be grips and paint.
Paint. I mean, we got a whole different EPA.
Well, I was just gonna say, but then there's a whole. Then you get into finishes, chemicals, with paint. And
I'll tell you right now,
powder coating, and that's a big deal with the EPA.
I would almost, if I had money to bet on this, and usually when I bet on everything I lose, so I might inadvertently help keep this alive. I think this custom paint industry's got like maybe 10 or 15 years left tops, for it's not gone, like gone, but the thing is that coatings are getting to a point where they, like wraps look good enough for most people. Like, there's a generation coming out of becoming adults that have no connection to custom paint. What, $10,000 to do that? Fuck that. I'll wrap it for $1,500, and then when I drop
change it.
Then I can change it or whatever. So, and it's going to be, the whole thing is going to go away. And I mean, it's costs so much now to paint a motorcycle.
They're going to price it out.
Yeah, that's what's happening now.
Yeah.
I mean, our whole industry, the paint industry, the custom paint industry is completely derived from the insurance collision repair side of things.
Yeah.
And that shit is through the roof right now, where, I mean, everybody in America is complaining about their insurance rates, and they might have perfect driving records, but it never goes down. It only goes up, right? I haven't had any issues, and I'm over 40 now. You would think you'd get that drop you heard about when you were 20 years old paying fucking premiums of insurance, right?
Yeah.
And it just never happens. And so, like, insurance goes up. A 5-mile-per-hour bumper damage thing is now a $10,000 repair on a car. Insurance rates are through the roof. Materials on refinish materials are fucking through the roof. And then over here, we're trying to get these custom pigments and stuff like that they're starting to not even sell anymore.
Right.
I mean, they're getting rid of so many custom colors. Like, the sun gold pearls that were on Harleys and stuff like that came out of the factory. Those pearls were made in a plant in Japan. They got wiped out by a tsunami about 10 years ago now, and with no intention of ever bringing that stuff back to market. So there's a whole line of pearls that they're called like a prismatic vibrance thing that PPG made, because a lot of PPG did Harley stuff. Can't get them anymore. You can find little pearl bottles existing that are going for like $5,000-$6,000 on eBay, just to get your hands on a little fucking smidge of it to do something with. So, and then the products, the paint materials that are affordable are like chopped so down, like quality wise, is diluted with like bullshit. They don't stick very good. They don't cover very well, but they're at a price point you can afford to do it, like paint at.
Right.
They're hard to work with in custom paint. So it's like you're spending more on materials. They're hard to work with, and you've kind of get to a point of a price cap where, you know, when you were doing $100,000 bike chopper or whatever they were building, to pay $15,000 on a $100,000 build didn't seem like a big fucking deal.
Right.
But if you go buy a Road Glide right now and you want to go to the nines or a really nice paint job from, you know, somebody in the industry that's a reputable painter, you're going to be around 10 grand
all day long.
That is a third of that bike's cost brand new.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the market for that is so small. I mean, there's a market for people that are doing it at a cheaper price, right? That, you know, they don't have the overhead, they don't have the business, they don't have the time invested, they don't, all these other things. Like, it's a great time to be a new painter. It's a bad time to be an old school painter or an older painter, right? It's just a market that I don't see it becoming. I see it going away before I see it, you know, getting better.
Well, that's the danger of this whole thing we're talking about.
Yeah.
Customization, period. I mean, when I grew up, there was a hot rod shop on every corner.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years ago, I was back in Connecticut, and there was one that was still there. Last time I went, it was gone.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've probably lost, you know, 40% of our shops in Texas over the past 10 years.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't have the exact numbers, but at one time there was 10,000 independent shops in this country.
Yeah.
There's like 3,000 or something now.
Well, I mean, the hot rod culture. I mean, just the truck market. That thing skyrocketed too about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, you used to be able to get a C10 and make it look pretty good for about 15 grand. You know, short body, something decent. Now you're seeing rust buckets go for 10 grand. You're looking at $150,000.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, those things were investments back then. I mean, I fucking had a graveyard of C10s behind my grandparents' house for a while that I should have held on to a little bit longer, you know. But I don't know, man. I am optimistic about, you know, the regime, as you eloquently put it. Hoping that there'll be some deregulatory things that get implemented that we'll see on this side of the space of, you know, motorcycles or customization in some kind of degree. No matter how big or small this industry is, there's still a voting population within motorcycling. Yes. So we can have we can actually use our collective voice to make change to benefit us.
And that's what I'm trying to do right now, is get us together as a group and use this collective voice to get what we want. And I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, the lobbyist calls me. I mean, they've been doing this for 40 years. I've been there a year and a half, and the guy calls me. Hey, I sit in the legislative sessions at these meetings and go, well, what about this and what about that? And everybody goes, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it blows my mind. You know, these guys have been doing this, and all of a sudden I'm getting this kind of attention and this kind of reaction, getting this stuff addressed. But now we need, we need, whatever the IMA needs support from our group to make this happen. That we do have a voice.
Yeah, yeah.
We need to exercise it.
Together we have a big voice. Divided we have nothing.
Right.
Yeah. So if we're all, you know, not giving a fuck, then everything that we know and love.
I mean, I'll be fucking dead and gone. So
yeah,
you know, I'm cool.
Yeah.
but my grandson, I want him to enjoy this, you know, and everybody in between there too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been a family tradition since 1915. You know, now it's gonna die.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, man, Bob, thank you for doing this. It was illuminating, not just to hear about your kind of path in the motorcycle, you know, aftermarket, but also like having this conversation about, you know, the legislation and all the things, the changes, and how that could implement and affect, you know, the way we personalize our bikes. You know what I'm saying? Could you, like, just real quick, like, let everybody know the website or wherever they can find to go to this?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's imamembers.org. We've made it real easy to join. Right on the home page, you can just click to join, and it'll go to a membership application. You put in your email address, and it brings you right there. You can do it online. If you don't like doing stuff online, you can print it out and send it in. But it's imamembers.org. At the top, there's some headings that include events coming up. Like I said, articles, reels and videos, and different things like that. The legislative updates, the legislative agenda. So that's real. But the big thing is if you join the MRF, which is our parent organization, will send you stuff every week about keeping you updated about what's important to keep our culture alive and our ability to choose and pick the way we want to ride. And if our action is required, it just makes it so easy.
Yeah.
They tell you who your reps are, how to get a hold of them, and push the button to let them know you care.
And what I'll do is, like, wherever people, if they're watching this on YouTube, they'll be in the description. There'll be the website will be on there. If you're listening to it on your phone, Apple, Spotify, there'll be a link in the description if you go to the show notes. So everybody go check it out. You know, we can, we got to help.
We can do this together. I got faith.
Yeah, I'm cynical, but we'll figure it out.
I'm trying. I ain't giving up anyways.
Right,
I'm too stubborn.
We're not going to go down without a fight.
Yeah, that's
All
right.
Well, thank you again, Bob. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to do that.